or just before the end of the day, and moving ahead with the Educator Standards and Practice Committee led by Dr. Olivia Oxendine. Dr. Oxendine.
Thank you, Chair Davis. I am Olivia Oxendine, and I chair the ES&P Committee of the State Board of Education, and joining me in that responsibility is Ms. Amy White. We're going to begin my portion of the agenda today with a new business item. It will be led by Mr. Carl Logan, who is the Section Chief for Driver Education, and joining him at the podium will be, later in the presentation, will be Ms. Tanya Easterwood and Dr. Amelia Royster Davis. This item is an update on the driver education and all that is going on in the area of curriculum development, all that is going on with the standards piece of the curriculum. Also, I need to underscore the fact that all of this is kind of tied to the latest trends in research, making sure that our LEAs, our districts, our PSUs are fully aware of what is going on in the field of traffic safety education. So with that said, I will turn to Mr. Logan, who is ready to present.
Thank you. Chair Davis, Vice Chair Duncan, Committee Chair Dr. Oxendine, Ms. White, and the rest of the board members and guests. Good afternoon. It's been another busy year for the driver education program. We like to provide you with a global overview as well as a few focal points. This is our annual program update along with an update for the Driver Education Advisory Committee. This update will cover 3 areas: administration, education of teachers and students, plans of moving forward. So just a quick reminder, 6 years ago when we began assembling this highly talented team, they like when I say that, to address the Reformation project recommended by the legislature and the 2015 National Assessment, it led to a monumental and crowning achievements with the assistance of North Carolina Virtual Public Schools and the licensure section, specifically Dr. Kim Evans and Susan Ruiz, which led to these two, actually the digitized curriculum and a teacher certification program. Also, please be reminded that the program is the initial step in the Graduated Driver License Program, or GDL, leading to licensure of our teen drivers. The North Carolina Strategic Highway Safety Plan states that our state's GDL program is one of the premier initiatives to improve younger driver safety. So our program actually plays a significant role in this plan and is included in 2/3 of the strategies. So today we've shifted from reactive to proactive, concentrating on providing the very best learning opportunity for our teens and by folding in State Board of Education goals and initiatives, and as well as Superintendent Truitt's Operation Polaris 2.0 priorities. The chart that you see here, as you know, we serve students in public, private, home, and federal schools. The pandemic backlog is no longer a widespread issue, so we have encouraged districts to adjust their enrollment strategies, which will alleviate those remaining areas. However, there are other issues that may slow or create backlogs. So please notice on the left and the right halves of this graph, our districts are very diverse in the size of 9th grade ADMs, which range from 200 students all the way to 15,000. So half of our districts on the right-hand side receive less than $100,000, which is actually closer to $50,000, and which indicates that we need to take a look at our allotment policy to level the playing field, so to speak. The districts must decide between teachers or instructional resources, including vehicles. So we're developing different models which will offer best scenarios for our schools to employ varying combinations of in-house and or contracting. So our goal is standardization with flexibility, because one size doesn't fit all. So therefore, the knowledge and experience of this DPI team is critical to the success of our local programs. And just a quick update on the Driver Ed Advisory Committee. After the first year of the chair, as chair and vice chair, Dr. Cheryl Leonard, Assistant Director of Governor's Highway Safety Program, and Vice Chair Chad Aharoon, Director of Driver Education for Alamance Burlington Schools, have been collaborating with the DPI team, focusing on administration and the committee of the committee as well as direction of the program. There are two specific areas I want to highlight is that we have updated the North Carolina Driver Education Strategic Plan, and we are working on the teacher requirements rule, and which were accepted by the committee and returned to DPI to move forward in the approval process. But note, the subcommittee meetings are open to the public as well as an invitation to participate by adding feedback by the districts and other stakeholders. There are two remaining rules that we need to work on, which are the requirements and the contracting rule. After that, they will move forward to the General Counsel and then be submitted to the State Board of Education, hopefully sometime this fall. Next, I'd like to yield to Dr. Amelia Royster Davis, our learning coordinator, who will share some information regarding both our educational programs.
Thank you, Mr. Logan. So next slide, please. Thank you. We would like to share some exciting updates regarding our Safety and Traffic Education Program, or STEP. Since 2019, we have successfully facilitated 11 cohorts, graduating 75 mentors and 281 teachers. We're proud to announce that 116 individuals have successfully received their 096 add-on from Licensure, indicating their mastery of the required competencies. We understand that we have about 41 teachers still that have applied for licensure and are just waiting for their applications to be processed. So the program is currently facilitated by 3 retired educators who serve as members of our curriculum and instructional teams. I do want to share that. Moving on to the impact of our programs on classroom instruction, we've witnessed a remarkable transformation. Engaging assignments were designed to promote critical thinking and the creation of meaningful artifacts. This approach encourages students to think independently, analyze information critically, and actively participate in their own learning journey. Additionally, our instructors have become more comfortable using a wide range of technologies, enhancing their instructional strategies that will ultimately provide our students with a more dynamic learning experience. To ensure continuous improvement, we have established an ongoing assessment system to evaluate program outcomes. This allows us to gather valuable feedback and engage in an iterative cycle of improvement. By constantly refining our program based on this feedback, we can provide an even better learning experience for STEP participants as well as the students of North Carolina. Taking a broader perspective is crucial for us to address the challenges we face in the coming years. Currently, 65 districts report that we have about 150 teachers that we're expecting to retire over the next 3 years. And so to address this shortage, we're opening new cohort opportunities to cultivate multiple on-ramps for a diverse group of educational professionals. So this strategic approach will help us build an effective infrastructure to recruit and retain high-quality teachers to support personnel for the benefit of every student in our state. Next slide, thank you. So the Safety and Traffic Education Program for Students, or STEPS, continues to be successful as well. We've designed this program to be flexible in regards to setting, schedule, and pace of learning. To facilitate this learning experience, we have implemented an LMS to help us digitize that instruction. And so by utilizing the system, it helps us seamlessly facilitate the learning experience while also ensuring that the instructors can effectively monitor and support the students' progress. Recognizing the challenges faced by some of our students, we have addressed the issue of course availability. So students who maybe have had part-time jobs or are student athletes, they are now accommodated through the flexibility of our program. STEPS is also adaptable to different learning environments. So we have teachers or instructors who are facilitating virtually through live sessions, or they're using our platform and actually delivering instruction in a traditional classroom. The system allows for adaptability further so that instructors can personalize the content to meet the unique needs of their students. To foster student engagement, we've implemented various interactive elements within our curriculum, so things such as note-taking guides, guided lessons, 3D animations, discussions, and instructor-assigned projects. So these engaging activities promote active participation, critical thinking, and deeper understanding of the subject matter. By adopting a blended approach that combines asynchronous and synchronous components, students can receive immediate feedback and have opportunities for reteaching. The personalized feedback loop promotes a deeper understanding of concepts and content. So we are currently in a soft launch phase, serving counties in various locations, so including the West, East, and Central Piedmont regions. Specifically, we are working with 5 districts: Catawba, Johnston, Lee, McDowell, and Orange, where we have served approximately 18,000 students. So this initial implementation has allowed us to continue to gather valuable feedback, can make continuous improvements to enhance the program, and also prepare for what we hope for is adoption across the state. And now I turn it over to Ms. Tanya Easterwood, our Business Systems Manager, to share more about our workflow and future initiatives.
Thank you, Dr. Amelia. Wow, how do we get all this done, right? So, as we prepare to do the work that we do here in North Carolina, we take a change management approach. So it focuses on 4 areas, which is training, communication, stakeholder engagement, and leadership alignment. So to ensure leadership alignment, we leverage existing reports and we gather relevant data on a quarterly and annual basis for compliance reviews. This also has the impact on our program outcomes and allows us to monitor the program efficiently. The data-driven approach has allowed us to draft a risk management model for budgeting so that we can do better projections in 2023 and 2024 school year. To support the administration of the program at the local level, we have also developed a driver education, administrative, and operations manual. This comprehensive manual is created and managed by our program coordinator, Ms. Cindy Taylor. Cindy serves as an immediate support, offering administrative guidance, recommendation, and policy interpretation to ensure smooth operations and compliance with established guidelines. We are currently in a soft launch, allowing the districts to review and share feedback. The manual should be fully implemented September 2023. Next slide, please. So with all these projects, how do we juggle it all with 5? So we use an agile approach. Agile tells us to have a backlog of work, but we don't like, as educators, we don't like to hear the word backlog, so we do a brain dump. So everyone in their consistent areas, we share one document, and everything that we can think of that we need to work on or have received feedback on in our areas, we put it in one centralized location. So that's where Microsoft Teams comes in. That makes us be awesome, right? So how we also do this is when we get that, we have an aspect of every area. And then how we prioritize it is we do legislation and SBE policy first. So currently we have a project that is already underway based on the graduated driver licensing legislative changes. So we already have a project in place to go back to review our content to figure out how will that implement and impact our program and make sure those revisions are ready for the upcoming school year. One significant challenge that we do face is the expected retirement over 170 teachers across 75 districts in the next 3 years. To address this issue, we have developed a modified teacher certification track. This track provides a pathway for new educators to enter the field and ensure a smooth transition to fill the anticipated vacancies. By actively addressing this workforce challenge, we aim to maintain the quality of driver education in our state. Our team's expertise and work we have done on the North Carolina programs have garnered recognition at a nationwide level. As a result, we have been invited to serve on national work groups and act as subject matter experts for other states. This recognition validates the effectiveness and solidarity of our program, which serves as a model for other states to follow. The Safe System Initiative has changed our view of how we see driver education in our state. We no longer just see it as driver education. Now we see this as an introduction to safety and traffic safety for our students. This shift reflects our commitment to providing a well-rounded educational experience that extends beyond the basic driving skills. And at this time, I will hand this back over to our awesome visionary, Mr. Carl Logan.
Thank you, Tanya. Sorry about that. Our rebranding campaign will include advocating for local administrations to consider the program as an integral part of the local school safety program. Required by statute, education on safe police stops must be taught to our teens to educate them on how to conduct themselves when they're stopped by the police. As you know, serious tragic interactions with police are on the rise. So the driver education program proudly announces a new partnership with the Center for Safer Schools. A special thank you for Director Karen Farrelly for our new partnership with Center for Safer Schools, where a local school resource officer, an SRO, is available to visit our classrooms and provide education on safe police stops to our student team driver applicants. At this time, Dr. Oxendine, Ms. White, I will yield for questions.
Thank you very much. That was very thorough. You know, oftentimes when I'm on the highway driving around and I come upon a student driver, and there's somewhere on the back of the, like on the bumper that says, "Be patient, there's a driver in learning," or something, in training.
Right.
I never realized what really goes on behind the scenes until I hear Mr. Logan come forward once a year or twice a year and goes into really deep detail about what is happening in driver education, kind of behind the scenes, and a lot is taking place, no doubt. Are there questions or comments? I do have a quick question. I heard you say just a few minutes ago that I suppose the curriculum is being implemented in 5 districts. Could
We'll
you
take that.
talk just briefly about what is your plan to expand that, maybe?
Yes, so we have been trying to acquire funding to actually be able to roll that out to other districts who are looking to adopt that across the state. Unfortunately, we've been unsuccessful in our endeavors to secure additional funding or kind of find different ways to collect funding from the districts. We're not able to do that. And so one of our special projects that we're currently exploring is potentially adopting a different LMS that would be more cost efficient so that we can move that project forward. It has been stalled for 2 to 3 years now.
And board members, I purposely asked that question so that we are mindful of some of the barriers and struggles they're having to expand this curriculum across the state. So if there's anything we can do through the General Assembly or other innovative ideas, I think we need to pursue that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Chair Davis, of
Yes,
course.
Dr. Oxendine, just picking up on your thoughtful remarks, I can recall a time when we really didn't have a DPI driver's ed program, and each district was left to its own devices, and sure, they made a lot of hard work and effort, but nothing like the update we just received. And so, Mr. Logan, I just want to thank you and your team for the contributions you're making to helping every one of our students develop those attributes in that particular look, or the whole child model. You and your team are making thoughtful, important, and lasting contributions to the education of our students and helping them grow up to be responsible adults. And there's no place more where our patients can be tested around responsibility than on the highway. And I thank you for everything you're doing to help our students become contributing adults in North Carolina. We need your team.
Education of the whole child, right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you ever so much.
Thank
for
you.
presenting to us today.
Thank you.
And we have later, we do have a consent item further in the agenda that also pertains to driver education that I will get to later. The next item is an ES&P. It's actually the beginning of our numbered items. And this is an action on first reading, and it will be presented by Dr. Seiberg. This is another community college coming forward to take advantage of the framework that the Department of Community Colleges approved last summer. And so Dr. Seiberg is ready to do a quick overview of this action on first reading item.
Good afternoon, board members. This month we're bringing Central Carolina Community College for your consideration to become an authorized ed prep program. As with other community colleges, we've been bringing to the board over the previous months. This program will abide by the same community college system framework approved by this board back in June of 2022. The program's already been through the Community College System Board review, and at that review, they've provided evidence and attestation that they meet the requirements that were outlined in the approved framework. And upon this board's approval, the program would be able to offer a residency program route that leads to elementary licensure. And for folks who are interested, applicants must have an undergraduate degree already to engage in that program. And the completion of that program leads to licensure and not a degree. The supporting documents that are included in your materials include a copy of the program framework that was approved, a copy of the curriculum outline, and the State Board of Community Colleges program approval summary.
Very good, thank you, Dr. Cyber. Questions or comments from my colleagues? And this is for action tomorrow. Thank you very much, and we will move on to the component of my agenda, which are the discussion items. This ES&P 3 is going to be presented by Dr. Kim Evans. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Sorry. ES&P 2, action on first reading. This is a CTE item, a technical correction in the area of CTED 004, and presenting is Mr. Marty Toby.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine. It's a pleasure to be here. The Office of Career and Technical Education is requesting a technical correction to policy CTED-004, which, as you know, governs our CTE initial restricted licenses. We've provided the policy draft as a reference with the requested revision highlighted in red on page 2. Our request is to add subsection 2.02.01, which states effective July 1, 2022, which means it would go into effect this school year. Teacher candidates or individuals who did not clear a prior initial CTE restricted license may apply for an initial CTE restricted license in a different teaching area, provided that they meet the necessary requirements. And not only will this correction provide consistency to State Board Policy LICN-001, as residency candidates currently now have this opportunity, but we also believe it'll provide additional flexibility to the field as they work to retain quality teachers. So we're respectfully requesting action on first read, and certainly happy to entertain any questions.
Are there any? If none, thank you so much, Mr. Toby.
Thank you, Dr.
We
Eckstein.
will act on this item tomorrow. Moving on and to another discussion item. This is ES&P 3. I'm back on track.
Yes, you are.
Dr. Evans, you have the mic.
Thank you. So I have 3 updates to LICN 003 around licensure testing. And the first one is about the Foundations of Reading Test 090, the ending date for that. If we could go to the next slide. Yes. So this test covers the reading subtest for elementary education and ECGC, so Exceptional Children General Curriculum. And so what is proposed here is for the effective end date would be July 31st, 2023. And the reason for this is because Pearson, the vendor, is retiring the test. And the State Board has already adopted the updated test, which is Foundations of Reading Test 190. So that is already in effect. And so both of these are used to fulfill the reading subtest. And so because it's being retired by Pearson, this is the proposed ending date. And I also wanted to note that this test, even though the ending date would be July 31st, 2023, if the State Board approves, that licensure would still accept the test for up to 3 years after the ending date. So for anyone that comes to licensure and wants to hold licenses in those 2 particular licensure areas, they have 3 years to use that test results, those test results. The next piece is about principles of learning and teaching, so PLT, clarification around that. Right now it is listed, this is proposed to remove this from a list. You can see the list right there of those secondary licensure areas. And this is to reduce confusion in the field because the test that is required is either EdTPA or PPAT. And right now it looks like PLT is also accepted for those secondary areas, and this can cause confusion in the field. I do want to note that EdTPA does have licensure area booklets for all of those areas. So it is covered through EdTPA, and then of course PPAT is not licensure area specific. And then the third and final update is vendor updates to 3 different tests. And you can see that they are all EC test, exceptional children test. And I want to note that if there's a lower scaled cut score, that does not mean there's a drop in standards or rigor. That has to do with the number of test items for that particular test. And so you'll see that the current test is 5545, and this is called the Core Knowledge and Severe to Profound Applications Test. The updated test would be Severe to Profound Test 5547. You can see the effective date for the current test would be until August 31st, 2024, and this is true for all 3 of these tests. And then with the effective date beginning for the updated test, September 1st, 2023. And you can see there what the licensure content exam area is. I do want to note, just like the Foundations of Reading 090, that it still has the 3-year window of acceptance for the current test, even after it's retired. So you can see here that this test, so the next 2 tests are covered by 1 test, and that would be, the updated test would be the Foundational Knowledge Test 5355, and you can see that the effective dates are the same. And this one focuses on special education general curriculum, so ECGC. And then the updated test also covers this current test as well. And then the last slide, I wanted to let you know the reasoning behind that. So what Praxis. So what Praxis did is they brought together a national advisory committee for these tests. And that means that there's a panel of special education teachers and teacher educators. So those from higher education. And they came together and they reviewed the standards and the redesigned test composition. And they decided that that 1 test would cover both of those areas. And that's a summary of what I just reviewed.
Are there any questions? So, Dr. Evans, next month I think we discussed that you would put these details in a table.
Yes.
In terms of
Yes.
each test and the effective date.
Yes.
Beginning and ending.
To reduce
The
confusion.
retiring
Yes.
test. But I would imagine, and you may not have an answer to this, but I would imagine our EPPs, once they are aware that a new test is coming, or the State Board of Education has approved these changes around these new test assessments, do you think they begin shifting their curriculum?
I think they definitely discuss what is different about those tests, and they also have regular check-ins with Praxis and Pearson. So there are monthly meetings for the EPP point of contacts, as well as monthly meetings with DPI through Dr. Seiberg.
And I believe in our meeting last week, we also discussed the fact that your team, Dr. Tomberlin's section, is in constant communication.
Yes, that is also true.
I think the table will help, so we look forward to that. It
Yes.
spells out these details that we've discussed. Any comments or questions from my colleagues? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we will go on to the next item. This is ES&P 4. It will be presented by, I believe, Dr. Tomberlin is going to present this item, and it It is pursuant to or pertains to LICN 001, but it also connects to a congressional act that was passed. It is HR 7939, and it has to do, the title of the act is the Veterans Auto and Education Improvement Act of 2022. And there's a lot of detail around this, but I kind of boil it down to an act that is going to remove some of the barriers in terms of teacher recruitment and teacher hiring, because spouses of military personnel that have an active license, teacher license, I'm thinking of my area, Fort Liberty, in Cumberland County, and we've got other large installations around the state that have spouses who are ready to teach. This is going to make that possible to some extent. So Dr. Tomerlin.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine. Good afternoon, board members. So I would like to preface this presentation with the acknowledgement that Superintendent Truitt and the General Assembly had been working on a similar provision for this legislative session. This is something that's of concern to many in the state. And fortunately, the federal government had passed this provision in January, which basically meets the requirements that the state was looking to implement. So I'm happy to review the conditions of this provision with you. And here's the policy as proposed, that military service members or the spouse of a service member who is under military orders to relocate to North Carolina and is in possession of a current educator's license from another jurisdiction shall be considered to hold a North Carolina educator's license for the duration of such military orders. So the applicant, so the kind of what one has to do to get this provision, we spell out here in these bullets. So the applicant will have to provide a copy of the military orders and documentation of marital status, if applicable, to NCDPI. The applicant's license from another jurisdiction and all other jurisdictions in which the applicant holds a current license is current and in good standing. The license has been actively used for employment as an educator during the 2 years immediately preceding the relocation. And then finally, the license from the other jurisdiction is appropriate for the position in which the service member or spouse of the service member will be employed. In other words, you can't have a science license from Virginia, get transferred to North Carolina, and then use that to teach math. We can't do that. So the subject areas of the license have to align. The second part of this is just some clarification for the field and for the board. The military-connected applicant is not issued a North Carolina license under this provision, but this is what we would call a salary authorization. It does allow them to be paid on the North Carolina teacher salary schedule as if they held an appropriate license. The provision will remain in effect until the military orders expire or June 30th of that same year, whichever is later. So if the spouse were to receive relocation orders, let's say in March, and the spouse remained to teach, that the provision would extend until the end of that fiscal year, so the spouse could continue out teaching in that school year. If a military-connected applicant wishes to obtain a North Carolina educator license after the terms of this provision expire, the applicant must meet all State Board of Education licensure requirements in effect at the time of application. So we welcome them to stay, but if they do so, they can no longer leverage this provision. They have to meet the requirements that the board has set out for that license if they are, and remediate any deficiencies if they have.
Questions or comments? Yes, Chair Davis.
So, Maria, can you go back to 5? So, Dr. Tomberlin, what's the definition of valid in that state? Valid out of state?
So it has to be current and in good standing. So they can't have any violations. It cannot be an expired license that they bring to us. They would have to bring a current and license that's in good standing.
Okay, so there's no assessment of the rigor or quality of the license
That is correct.
compared to our requirements.
Now, we, of course, in North Carolina we will accept folks with other license, and we will consider that license as the basis, but we do we do underlying research to make sure that they completed a program that was recognized by that state and that they passed a test that has comparability to the North Carolina test. We employ all those measures when we issue a North Carolina license, but under this provision, however they got that license, during the time of their deployment, they would be able to use it in North Carolina.
And can you go back one more slide, Dr. Petrie? So the last bullet, how will we make the judgment that the license is appropriate?
So this comes up from time to time. There are license areas in other states that we simply don't have a comparable license area in North Carolina. And when that happens, we will work with the applicant to find the most closely proximal license in North Carolina and issue that license. And we would do the same process here. So if you came to us, I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but basket weaving license from Virginia, we don't have basket weaving, but we might consider it some kind of art license in North Carolina. That's a poor example, but it does happen from time to time, and we internally in the department find the next closest license. And we also look at the underlying educational requirements of that to see if there are other licenses that have similar education.
Okay, so last one. So other than the time-bound nature of this provision, what would prohibit us from doing this for non-military spouses? Anyone else coming into our state who has a license from another state?
Well, there's the licensing of educators in North Carolina is solely under the purview of the State Board of Education. So there's nothing that would prevent you, provided they're meeting any of the statutory obligations that are related to the license. So you could do this. It has been our experience in the past that the board has not elected to go down that route, that they wanted to continue to maintain the North Carolina standards. But you certainly could adopt, basically what this would be is just license reciprocity. As long as you have a license from another state that's current and valid, we would accept that as the mechanism for issuing you a North Carolina license.
Yeah, I just know we have so many situations where principals and superintendents have someone in the classroom, because it's someone they can find that doesn't even come close to being licensed, and at least this approach would provide more of a licensed candidate. I realize that's the tension that we're facing in upholding standards and having teachers in the classroom. But
When I first read this item, I thought about reciprocity, and the way it reminds me, it comes across on the surface as kind of a modified approach to reciprocity. So this congressional act may be taking us in that direction.
It certainly could, but I do want to point out that this does not require the state to issue a license.
Right.
It just allows them to recognize it during a prescribed period of time.
Right.
The other issue that I do want to,
But sorry to interrupt.
yeah,
But what it means is we're going to put in front of our students someone who's licensed in another state, and we're going to pay them the same way we're paying teachers today. So we're doing everything but issuing them a license, it seems to me.
Yes.
that is correct. But I would like to point out that for a teacher who's licensed in another state, they are generally, I would say, over 90% of the time licensed in North Carolina as well. The thing that causes some difficulty is when they have to produce transcripts to show how they completed a program. And in some cases, and this is tied to statute, some cases where we have veteran teachers who come to the state who do not have, and are applying for elementary education licenses, that do not have a clear subtest of math and reading. That's very common for folks who have more than 20 years of experience, that they won't have those subtests. And that triggers a situation where they have to meet that requirement in North Carolina. But that is statutory, and that's not board policy. So those are the instances where people express some frustration with an out-of-state license. By and large, if you have an out-of-state license, you are going to get a North Carolina license if you went through proper channels to obtain that license.
Ms. Chemnitz. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay,
Really quick question, because I think I know the answer, but the way that this is presented, it looks like this particular provision only applies to North Carolina. I'm assuming this is across.
This is across the state, across the nation. And it is not specific to education. This governs all occupational licensing boards. So it would be true of your barber as well, or your hairstylist. Sorry, I didn't mean that.
But the starting point, the spouse must be an active duty.
Yes, they must be on active duty.
That's the bottom line.
So we have plenty of folks who are in North Carolina that receive duty calls. They could not, because they were not required by the military to move to North Carolina. They would not be able to leverage this policy.
Okay, so they have to be assigned.
That's
their
right.
duty here in North Carolina.
That is correct.
My final, any other questions? Mr. Duncan, Vice Chair Duncan.
Thank you. Could you explain documentation of marital status, if applicable? What exactly does that mean?
So they could either provide a marriage certificate indicating that they are married to the military person. So the military orders would come in. If it's the spouse, they would provide some kind of documentation. It could be a marriage license. It could be the military issues spousal IDs to folks, so they could just provide a copy of that. Anything that lets us know that they're truly, that they are married.
You can't be a significant other, you have to be the spouse of.
Yeah, I just didn't know what was being required there.
Mr. Hall.
Oh, no, I do.
You did, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. I have one final question. In terms of our school districts, do you anticipate that they might have to develop some policies around this item? What I'm thinking of is, let's say that the spouse, something happens, the spouse passes away, the military personnel passes away, or there's a divorce, or so does the act, I'm sure the act doesn't speak to that, but.
No, it doesn't. But presumably, if that were to occur, that the service member or the spouse would have until the end of the fiscal year. I mean, they could appreciate this provision until the end of the fiscal year, and then
There would be some communication.
they would either have to apply. They would have to then apply for a North Carolina license.
It's a really good act, definitely so. And you have the next item too.
Oh,
The report
then I will stay.
to the North Carolina General Assembly on the teacher bonus program.
So, as you know, back in January, the state issued the EVOS teacher bonuses. And those there are three separate bonus programs that cover third grade reading, fourth and fifth grade reading, and fourth through eighth grade mathematics. And what it does is it awards a bonus to teachers who score in the top 25% of EVOS ratings across the state and then within their own local districts. And so every year after that distribution of the bonuses, we are required to submit a report to the General Assembly. In the past, this has been a very vague report. What's the impact? What happened? But this year it was a little different in that the legislation was very specific about the questions that the General Assembly wanted answered. The report you saw has a whole bunch of tables that answer those questions as they were submitted to us. I just want to briefly go over kind of what the general focus of that report is and point out some what I find to be some interesting findings from that report. So the report overview, we looked at third grade reading. The General Assembly wanted to know the average bonus amount for teachers qualifying for the state and local bonuses in third grade reading, the number and percentage of teachers who qualified for bonuses in January 2023 and were also eligible or qualified in January 2019 and or January 2020. So this is saying of those people who earned a bonus this year, how many of them also earned a bonus either in January 2020 or January 2019 or both. Of course, 21 and 22 are absent from this because of COVID. We did not issue bonuses in those years. Then the General Assembly wanted to know the statistical relationship between past bonus qualification and qualification in January 2023. And then finally, the distribution of bonuses among public schools. So from the findings, first we look at third grade reading bonus. Statewide, teachers, there were 1,433 teachers who were eligible for the statewide bonus. And when I'm using these terms eligible and qualified very specifically, eligible means that you earned an EVAS score that was in the top 25%. Qualified means you remained in the LEA in which you earned that bonus until at least January 1st of the following year. And that's what you have to qualify to get the money. So when we say qualified, those are people who received the money. They remained employed in that grade and subject or in that LEA until the following year. So the percentage of those eligible who qualified is 85.1%. So about 15% of folks were eligible but did not receive the bonus because they either left the subject or they left third grade reading or they left the district. The average amount paid for the bonus was $3,489. So for the local bonus, there were 1,343 eligible and 1,130 qualified. That's an 84% qualification rate. The average local bonus amount was $3,402, but there was a range of bonuses here. Local bonuses paid somewhere between $1,900, almost $2,000, and $3,500, which was the max. And in the report, I point out the way the General Assembly requires the bonus to be distributed results in some LEAs actually receiving a share that is greater than $3,500. But the statute prevents them from receiving that money. And because of this method of distribution, there's about $4,500,000 that's not distributed of these bonus funds to teachers. And one of the things I mentioned in the report is if it's the intent of the General Assembly to distribute all those funds, they might want to think a little differently about that, the way we distribute those local funds, because money is being left on the table and no one gets that money. The relationship between current and prior performance. In most cases, about 40% of teachers who qualified for at least one bonus in the past and remained in the grade and subject for 21-22 school year received a bonus in January 2023, 40%. The percentage of teachers who qualified for a bonus in both 19 and 20 and qualified for a bonus in 2023 ranges from about 48%, that's for reading, up to about 67%, or 2/3 of those qualified again for the bonus in the 2023 school year, and that's for mathematics. The relationship between current and prior performance appears stronger for mathematics than it does for reading. Finally, bonus eligibility is only moderately related to retention of teachers in the grade and subject. And when I say moderately, I want to be very clear that actually that relationship is slightly negative. We know that teachers on average move districts at about a 12% rate across the state. We've got about a 15% rate for those who are eligible for the bonus. So in terms of retention, this might not be the strategy that is yielding the impact that we want. Statistical relationship between current and prior performance. And those differences, I just talked about this. So we're looking at both what happens if you earn the bonus in 1 year and 1 year only, what's the probability that you'll receive the bonus again in 2023, and then again for those who qualified in both years of the program. And the table in the table 5 in that lays out those relationships that you can see. It is interesting that that probability is very high for people who score in both, who earn the bonus in both years. As observed in other sections of this report, next slide, I'm sorry. Teachers of mathematics who have qualified for 1 or 2 bonuses in the past have a higher probability of qualifying for the bonus than reading teachers do. And this is logical if you think about the fact that reading is one of those things that can be practiced outside of the classroom, and mathematics is much less likely to be explored, tinkered with outside of the classroom than is reading. These analyses are suggestive of EVOS measuring differences in instructional quality of teachers rather than EVOS growth being a function of the type of students that teachers instruct in a given year. And what I mean by this is we've got an example of how being highly effective in the past over multiple different cohorts of students and with an intervening pandemic, those teachers are still much more likely to get that bonus after all those years than a teacher who didn't, which suggests to me, it's suggestive, I'm not saying this is causal, and this would require further investigation, that really when we think about, a lot of folks think that EVOS is a function of the students you get in your classroom. And this is really suggestive that is not the case, that this is something that is inherently different about these teachers. And this warrants, more than anything that I found in this report, this warrants further investigation. And then finally, the distribution of bonuses. This is every school, every charter school, and what percentage of the statewide bonuses and or local bonuses they received. You can imagine that this piece of the report would take up at least 100 pages. And so what we've done here is we've provided a link in the report that this is a public link that anybody can click on, and you will have that. We've set up a dashboard where you can look at any LEA you want. You can drill down and look at different things. We just felt like it would be much better to have this as an electronic resource than to provide it in a hard copy of the report. But that is my report, my summation of the report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there questions? Superintendent Truitt.
So you may have said this already, so apologies if you did, but are we able to see of teachers who experience mobility, in other words, they went from one district to another, can we compare their EVOS, whether or not they were a teacher who received this? This includes that mobility when you're talking about teachers who have received this?
Right.
So in other words, what you're saying is suggestive is that the idea that, I teach in a low-income school and therefore I'm less likely to get this bonus because my students aren't going to do well is not what this data suggests.
That is not what the data suggests, exactly. The data suggests that this is picking up an inherent quality in the teacher or a learned experience of the teacher rather than a reaction to the certain type of students that the teacher has been assigned in a given year.
Thank you.
But to answer your other question, no, this report doesn't look at that because, and that's exactly the area of further exploration that I think this report requires is, do we see that same effect if the teacher moves? Of course, they would be ineligible for the bonus if they did that. But we could look at did they score in a similar way to how they did before, and really seeing if our theory persists across movement from district to district would be a really interesting thing to study. But it was not asked for in the report, so I didn't go that far.
Yes, Ms. Kamnitz.
So So they would be ineligible for the bonus for a short period of time, but then.
That's right.
Once they, whatever that is, then they would become eligible again.
That is-
So you
that is
still could
correct.
track them.
Oh, yes, we definitely could track them, but
If they're not eligible, we can track them.
yes. We can track them even if they, we could track all kinds of things, but there are lots of questions that this report raises, and the hope is that it will raise those with the General Assembly as well, and future research can be conducted in this regard.
Are there other questions or comments? Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Just had a comment about bonuses in general. A lot of elementary school teachers will speak to me about how the third grade teachers get this bonus, yet the kindergarten teachers were the ones who taught them how to read. The first grade teachers taught them how to comprehend more complex literature, etc. And so I think about these bonuses, but I think it's wonderful to offer them to anyone who grows a kid, but I think everyone grows a kid. And so that's a lot to consider. You know, like I think every teacher in a building has an incredible impact. And when we think about school performance, I'm an EOC teacher. I teach 10th grade English. I feel the pressure of that immensely, the impact of our school. It feels like it sits on my shoulders, like how our school will score. I don't get bonuses, by the way. Like we don't get them in 10th grade English. But I wonder if more educators had the opportunity to earn a bonus, if they would all take part in the process of helping our students become better readers, helping them become mathematicians, etc. So that's all. Just something from the field that a lot of people express.
It's been raised many times. It has.
But unfortunately, what your research makes clear is that it's not impacting teacher retention.
It is not that I can see. It does seem that the attrition rate out of those tested areas and those who are participating in the bonus, even for those who are eligible, especially for those who are eligible, is higher than what we see on average.
So, Dr. Tomberlin, a question that I have goes back to a point you made a few minutes ago, the difference between eligible and qualified. What if that teacher had no choice about moving into a different content area?
There are no provisions in the law that provide for exceptions to that. I've had many a teacher angry, crying.
Reassignments.
Yeah, because they were reassigned by their district. Well, if they're reassigned by their district, if they stay in the district, they are still eligible for that year's bonus, but they could be reassigned to a different subject area and then not qualify for the
That's
bonus
what I mean.
again. But yeah, so I think I misspoke earlier when I said they had to stay in the
Content.
I think they do have to stay in the content in order to be eligible, but I can go back and
If you would.
and look at that.
That's major.
But I do know they have to remain in the LEA until January 1st. This year there was a difference in the provision in that if they retired from that LEA at the end of the year, between the end of the prior school year and January 1st, they could still earn the bonus. And that's been a concession that the General Assembly has made, but that's the only exception.
Other questions? Vice Chair Duncan.
I was actually going to ask a question for our teacher advisors, if they have any thoughts about why retention rate is not being assisted, but in fact going in the other direction from this, if you have any thoughts on that.
$3,000 isn't enough to feed my family. It's not, I think it'd be great. I'm grateful, but it's not enough to keep a lot of people in a classroom or in the field. It's nice. It doesn't support my family. So it's a bigger issue, I think. I think that when you have great potential and great skills, that other people see those skills and they try to recruit us out of the classroom. And that is what's been happening, I think, in our state. We see an opportunity to feed our families in a better way, which is really sad.
And I would also say, this is a lot of emphasis on one test on one day. As a fourth grade teacher who I benefited from this bonus, I got that check in January after the work. You had the EOG in June. You don't get to see that you even did anything until January when it's oh, you got something else in the bank account today. But so there's also that of you're just not, you don't even know if it's gonna happen or really not until you go back and look. Again, it's a lot of pressure on one test one day when I'm actually doing, as we've talked often about, we're doing a whole lot more than preparing for this one test on one day and then deciding whether or not I get compensated for it. And from what you just said, there's still some money on the table, and that was quite concerning for me there. But that very concerning. But that is I mean, that's what I would add to that too. It's just you don't really know until you know. And
But also, do bonuses just have to be related to retention, or can it just be related to, hey, thanks, you did a good job? Like, do we have? Is that what the purpose of the bonus is? Do you know what I'm saying?
The purpose of the bonus is to reward third grade teachers for leading their kids to proficiency on end of grade tests.
yeah.
So I guess that's why I was questioning it. Like, is it about keeping them, or is it about just saying, you killed that? Like, thank you so much.
Well, I think any bonus structure would be intended to be a retention bonus, just like teachers ask for retention bonuses to stay in the classroom. The legislature is saying, well, let's reward teachers who are killing it rather than just making it to the next year and staying in this job.
So I think the whole eligibility qualification thing is an indicator that both things are being recognized by the General Assembly. So in order to be eligible, you have to be in the top 25%. And in order to appreciate that bonus, you have to stay where you are. So both things seem to be part of the provision, part of the intent of the bonus program. And I hear what you're saying is, it would be great if just the recognition that you did this for kids, but my assumption from reading the statute is that both things are valued by the General Assembly.
And I will say, just to add on, I will say January is a very tough month anyway. Like, we literally nickname it Brokuary, because that's that time that paycheck has to stretch like an extra 2-3 weeks, and it definitely comes at the right time. So I'm not going to say that it doesn't come at the right time, but I agree with what Ms. Carper said about that distribution. Like, how are we also making sure that everyone in that school who touches children, to make sure that they're at that space, are all benefiting too.
I do want to point out, to add to what our teacher advisors provided us, is that this may be a simple fiscal calculation on the part of the teacher. So a move from one district that has a supplement that's $5,000 less to another district, the bonus may not even factor into that decision. They do the math, and it's a net gain of $2,000 if they move, and they go ahead and make the move. That may be playing into it as well.
Are there other questions? This is a very good discussion, and additional question.
So, Dr. I want to go back to the conclusion that make sure I got it right, that those receiving the bonuses are a result of higher teaching quality than the preparedness of their students. Is that the conclusion?
The conclusion is, so it's not, well, I want to preface this by saying I find it suggestive. I don't have any proof of anything or any causal relationship. But what one would expect is, if you're looking at these bonus categories over years and teachers are getting different students. So one of the complaints of EVOS that I hear quite regularly from teachers is, I didn't make EVOS this year because I had a really difficult batch of students this year. Or she made EVOS because she got all the good students. And what this suggests to me, and again, it's not conclusive, is that EVOS is measuring something about the instructional quality of the teachers themselves, not the students that they are assigned to. In other words, EVOS is controlling for those differences in students. And what's left is the differential effect of my instructional capability versus your instructional capability. And that's a really important thing. Unless you address the root cause that this teacher doesn't have the instructional capacity that we need him or her to have, you're not going to change the outcome, even if you assign different students. So, and that's the focus that that I would like to communicate to folks is if the EVOS scores are low and not desirable, then the appropriate action is to improve the instructional capacity of the educator, not to reassign students.
So, and the key word I think I heard is it's suggestive.
That is correct.
So my interpretation of that is that there has not actually been an analysis done to support that conclusion. Okay. Okay, all right, thanks.
Another point along those lines is the importance of, since mathematics is, there's a constancy between current, between current and prior performance, prior and current performance. Could have something to do, even though third grade may not be applicable, but it could have something to do with the specialization of the math teacher.
It's possible. We don't know if.
Third grade is not specialized
So for math, you would be talking about the fourth grade and not fourth through eighth grade. Clearly, in middle school, there's specialization going on. Math teachers in middle school don't teach other subjects, but in elementary, yes, you could. I mean, this could be related to schools that may be departmentalizing. You're going to teach math for all the kids, and you're going to teach reading for all the kids, as opposed to you're going to teach all the core subjects in your class.
Natural strengths and math aptitude.
Yeah.
Very good. That was a great discussion. Very important report. And what will be interesting is how the General Assembly uses the findings.
Indeed. Thank you.
Very much, Dr. Tomberlin. And the last item is a consent item. This is relative to a general statute that does require a driver education advisory committee. This is an item coming to us as a consent item by Mr. Carl Logan, the current member who is rotating off the advisory committee is Dr. Carol Ann Hudgens, and coming to us as a recommendation is that we approve Ms. Sherry Vernelson, who is the section chief of sensory support and assistive technology in the EC division. And Dr. Carol Hudgens has served 2 consecutive terms, and Ms. Vernelson will replace her. That concludes my agenda.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine. We'll now turn to the business operations team led by Vice Chair Duncan. Vice Chair Duncan.
Thank you, Chair Davis. Along with Dr. Wendell Hall, we lead the BizOp committee and have several items for your consideration today. Our first 4 items are actions on first read. First BizOp 1 is approval of contracts over $500,000. Sorry, do we need to switch order?
Perhaps, if you could pause for a minute.
Glad to.
Does he need to go now? Yes. Okay. All right, then we'll adjust our schedule and we'll go to Government Community Affairs with Mr. Hall and pause on BizOp.
Okay,
Mr. Hall.
We used to be kicked around, we like it.
Yeah, no problem. At this point in time, thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this point in time, we will switch gears and hear from Mr. Jamie Farber, who's the Director for our Governmental Relations, Community Relations person. Everyone recognizes the fact that as we sit today, things are happening over the General Assembly. Bills are moving, bills are not moving, new bills are being looked upon differently, things of that nature. We've asked Ms. Farber if he would give us an update on some of those bills that are of interest, high interest, of DPI and the State Board of Education, and also some other things that might pop up during that time. We also have one consent item on the agenda that we will talk about a little bit later. Ms. Farber.
Thank you, and thank you to the chair for reorganizing the reorganization. Superintendent Truitt and I actually, you see on this slide right now on House Bill 142, Protect Our Students Act, happened at 2 o'clock, and she was testifying over there. And that has now moved through Senate Judiciary onto Senate Education. But I do want to thank the Committee Chair Hall for his leadership on this, and also the Vice Chair Jill Kamnitz on the conversations that we have ongoing. And I'm going to try to do this as quickly as possible, but to ensure that we get touch all the things that we discussed during the committee. So first off, you're seeing this slide. These are bills that, the first several slides are the bills that we're tracking. These are all the bills that have moved recently. So Senate Bill 193, Career Development Plans, that is in the House. It has not moved in the House after passing the Senate, but it is in both budgets. So what that tells us is that this might be a budget provision rather than a standalone bill. We are still advocating for this to move as a standalone bill so we can get the policies in order sooner than the budget, but we'll continue to monitor that. Healthy students. I know that this was a priority of the superintendent and the state board, is to ensure that we have a nurse in every single school. Both the Senate and House budget chairs filed a bill separately. This provision, which would be about $100 million, was not reflected in either the House or the Senate budget. We are still advocating for this in the final conference report. And then House Bill 8, computer science graduation requirement, passed out of Senate rules last week. The last stop would be the Senate floor. There have been no amendments to this bill. So if there are no amendments on the Senate floor, then this will be sent to the governor for his signature. Education omnibus bill. This has been referred to Senate rules. Several provisions have been removed from this and stuck in other bills. We continue to monitor this one. Our team, with the government affairs team, is closely monitoring this bill to see when it moves and if it moves. There's always an education omnibus bill every year with technical corrections and fixes that we see, and we think that will be this. Maybe this will be that vehicle. I already talked about Protect Our Students Act. And then registered nurses in schools. This would provide some more flexibility on the type of nurses that schools could hire. This actually found its way in the Senate budget. It's also passed the House. So considering that's passed the House, ended up in the Senate budget, we feel very confident that it will be reflected in the final conference report.
May I ask a question quickly? But that does not include one being in every school. That's the major difference there.
That's the major difference. That provides so you can allow for a 2-year degree to be a certified nurse inside a school building. They did, in the Senate budget, they did discuss nurses, and I'll touch on that when I get to the Senate budget. As for principal licensure changes, this has made it through Senate Ed, is also made it through Senate Rules. One amendment was changed in this, so if the Senate, if no more amendments happen, it will be sent back to the House for concurrence. You probably can't see it on there because of the subtitles here. If you can scroll up just a little bit. Okay, the only change was they went from 350 hours to 500 hours, but it still is a minimum. And that was what the senators proposed as an amendment and was adopted. So the state board still has the authority to decide what they want to do after that, but it will be a minimum of 500 hours going forward for the internship. School athletic transparency bill. We discussed this last time. I just want to give an update that this was not brought for a vote in House Ed yesterday, but it was discussed in length. There does seem to be a lot of interest in General Assembly members to ensure that the intent of what the bill that was passed a few years ago, that it is fully implemented. I know that Allison and her team has been working a lot on this, and we continue to be in dialogue with them. But I do want to let you know that we have explained to them that if this bill or a similar version of this were to come to DPI, there would be a lot more responsibility with the department, and we would have to have some FTEs to support this, or we will not get the desired results of what the legislation requires.
How did the hearing go yesterday on this?
I thought it was interesting. The Senate has their viewpoint on it. The High School Athletic Association has their viewpoint on it. I do think that we should probably have some conversations with the state board and with staff about some of the things that were said there, and maybe we could help shed some light on the issues that both are saying. But I do think it's all. I think the superintendent was even there, and I think she recognized that people are just not talking to one another as much as they should be, and so we're trying to bridge that gap, and I continue to commend Allison and all the work that she's been doing. This has been a labor of love for her and the attorneys.
I'm just concerned, and I hear that all the back and forth that's going on with this particular bill, and I know there was public input yesterday and some discussion. I was driving in, so I couldn't hear anything going on per se, but this is important.
And if I
I'm-
may,
I'm
Mr.
sorry,
Hall,
Madam
I'll
Chair.
just say to you that the House and the Senate are not on the same page
Nope.
with this, let alone on the same page with the High School Athletic Association leadership. That was very interesting to listen to.
You got ADs, you got principals, you got coaches, all of those voices. And bringing them together is ideal in order for it to get through this. But I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, so in addition, primarily what I see in this bill is it shifts the current responsibility that the state board has and moves it to the superintendent. So if there's additional positions required, if that should occur, I would argue that those positions are required now.
Sure. I think also there's more work on the in there. There's more specific work than is right now in statute. I think a lot of the work that was given to the state board would be more put in law that the department would handle. And for example, eligibility requirements. It was brought up at committee yesterday is the senators who spoke said that that eligibility requirements was given to the state board, and then they gave that authority back to the High School Athletic Association. And what we've explained is that the clock kind of ran out on that, and that was the deal that was struck with the MOU that was signed in. If there was more time, maybe they could have been more negotiations. So I think that the discussion there is just ensuring that that authority, whoever has it, is then given that support.
Okay, anybody else?
Okay, next one. And this Math That Counts has not moved as a standalone bill in the House yet. This is sponsored by Representative Elmore and Cotham. However, this did make the House budget, and the committee chairs did want to have some feedback on this bill. What I will say about the Math That Counts, and I have Dr. Marr here if he would like to go in more in the weeds with you on this, is they drafted a bill that was very similar to the Excellent Public Schools Act that dealt with literacy. The issues that we've raised to the bill sponsors is that English is not math. There's no definitive science of math out there like there is the science of reading that everybody can get behind. So when you just try to replace words with English for math, it doesn't really work as well when drafting a bill. They have taken a lot of our feedback. We've spent, I would say, hours with bill drafting and others to, if they were to proceed, how best to proceed. But I did think some of the highlights that I'll just read is it would require the state board require the local boards to align with North Carolina Standard Course of Study, have evidence-based, engage students, and provide them with relevant challenges and pathways deeper understanding. But then the bigger thing is down below is that they, in this bill, would allow for an increased number of teaching assistants and classroom size flexibility. Now, the House has proposed these type of measures before. The Senate has not gone along with that, so we will see what the negotiation is if this does end up in the final conference report, if something like this were to appear. But this, even the bill sponsors have told us this idea of a math would not be even possible if you do not provide more teachers' assistants and you do not provide classroom flexibility inside the school. Would you like to add anything else? Okay. Yes.
Jill?
So basically, this would mean that in grades 4 and 5, you had 3 math assessments, beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of the year, just like we did for reading.
Yes.
That's basically what that first.
Yes. Well, speaking with the bill sponsors, they want to ensure that before you get into, as much as you can, before you get into middle school, that you are at least have a strong baseline of math before you start getting into the higher level maths. Yes.
Vice Chair?
Is there educational research out there that would suggest having 4th and 5th grade teacher assistants will raise math scores?
We can look. Oh, okay, there we go.
I'm not aware of any, that's why I asked.
No, I'm not aware of any either. I think Jamie's covered all of this, so I do want to mention that the math team did do a a thorough review of this bill and provided comprehensive feedback on all of the pieces, including, you'll notice there's a requirement here around EVOS analysis of formative diagnostic assessments, and that's not what EVOS is for, nor what it does. So there are some technical problems inside of this bill. I think we wouldn't argue that we would like to get on a path of systemic math instruction across the state in the same way that we've done reading. This, I don't think, gets us there. So the math team is engaged right now in the first steps of standards review. So you saw the timeline for all the different standards. They're doing the kind of research work on that now. We've got some interventions going on in math. We're looking to align those interventions with best practices. So we're taking the initial steps now. I do believe in the next year to 2 years, we will be moving towards a path that is kind of better informed than perhaps we are, than we have right now.
I have a quick, just a thought. I want to connect a thought to that. I don't know whether this would be applicable, usable at all, have any utility at all, but aren't we collecting math data through the check-ins?
We are.
And
so we would work to align this in some way.
To this discussion.
Yep.
Wouldn't you say?
Yes. I think the thing to remember about K-5 math heading into middle school is that in our current system of public K-12 education, the time is fixed and the learning is variable. And nowhere does that pose a problem for most students than in math. Because if the three of y'all take a fractions quiz and you get a 70 and you get an 80 and you get a 90, you all three still have learning gaps. But guess what? The teacher needs to move on. And that is my theory of how we end up in math. And until we give teachers the freedom and the flexibility to not require all students to move through at the same pace, I don't know that we're going to see any monumental changes.
And check-ins are optional.
Correct.
Of course they are, but that could change. The other thought of that is I have to go back to Tom Tomberlin's report on this report to the General Assembly on the
Bonuses.
yes, and what we learned at suggestive finding that math teachers seem to have constancy across numerous years. There's got to be a way to blend all of this thinking.
Sure. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think, one of the other challenges we have is math is one of those areas in which we have, large areas in which we don't have licensed math teachers, right? And so that compounds the problem of providing high quality instruction if you've not actually been prepared to teach the content, the core content.
Okay.
Thank you.
I've noticed that in math, particularly, the students, they just don't react the same. And especially in the lower grades, our teacher prep programs, a lot of the primary teachers don't have the concentration in math. I was a math major. That was my thing. So in middle school, I taught it. If a child could do it this way or this way, if it was a sound way to do it, I could say, okay, do it that way. I've checked, it'll work. You may take 2 steps more, but you can do it. A teacher that didn't have all the classwork and the training I did, that depends on the textbook a lot, may say, the book says do it this way, you need to do it this way or you're not doing it correctly. And they spend time trying to get them to do it a way that they're not comfortable with or they might not already know. And that's just an observation on my part. I don't know the answer to it. But as far as math is concerned, a math teacher, if they can or not, needs to be able to tell if you don't do it exactly like the book says, but it's a sound way, it'll work every time. Then why tell a child not to do it that way and learn something foreign to them?
and slow them down. I may be wrong about that. I always leave room for that. But it's difficult for elementary teachers to be able to teach all the subjects and be proficient in all of them. It's just very, matter of fact, I think it's probably a small percent of the teachers can be proficient in every subject. Really good teachers are, but I think that leads us to some of our problems.
Okay. Anything else? Continue.
Well, now on to the Senate budget. So on this slide, I don't have enough room to put everything that was in the budget, so I try to just get some highlights. And just know that in both the House and the Senate budgets, there were provisions in there that many overlap. I'll say that. So that shows that they have their priorities in both chambers, and then there will be some type of conference, as we all know. But what is in the Senate budget is that education funding is increased to $17.2 billion for the next fiscal year, and then it is increased again by $400 million to $17.6 billion in the following fiscal year. And then this is what I was talking about earlier, and I'll show you the provision. It does create the big provision here is it creates a new school health personnel allotment and increases funding by $10 million and 120 more personnel for school nurses. And I'll show that special provision in more detail later on when we do special provisions. As for salaries, state employees will receive 5% pay raise. Teachers will see a 4.5% pay raise. Starting teacher will be 11%. And with all the additional allotments and funding, and I'm going to bring up Alexis in a minute to go into more details on some of the more finer points that school business deals with. Senator Berger said at his press conference that, in his estimation, that no teacher in the state with the Senate budget will be making less than $46,000 a year. So that was their statement there. And so the average teacher pay will be $59,000. The Senate went a lot more aggressive on the beginning teachers. As for the priorities that were in the Senate budget for the State Board and DPI, there was an additional $35 million non-recurring for school safety grants. That's similar to the amount of funding that the Center for Safer Schools got last year. Fully funds the anonymous tip line at $850,000 per year. Salary supplements for ATR. I'm going to talk more detail about this in a minute, $10.9 million. AIG funding, this is the first time we've seen an increase, if this does go through, an increase in more than 20 years, I believe, for the AIG community. And then the small county supplemental funding increased by close to $5 million. And another one that we've really been advocating for, the literacy coaches' salary increases. As a reminder, the General Assembly provided 115 FTEs to the department so that they could be reading coaches in every single school district in the state. It is hard to recruit some of those people in where there's a higher supplement that's provided, and so this will help offset those costs so that we recruit the best talent into these positions. And then for the reduced price meal copays, if you remember in the House budget, they did a $7 million sweep and just paid off everybody's meal debt. What the Senate did is they leveraged $3 million recurring and then $3 million non-recurring, so that way we could fill in the gap for everyone who is underneath the free and reduced lunch program. This is what we've been advocating for. That way there's people who go in and out of the free and reduced program aren't penalized, and it also does not encourage people to not pay their debts either across the board, whether you are in the free and reduced plan or not. Also, what was very interesting is so far there's only one additional FTE that was given to the department in both the House and Senate budgets, and that is an Office of Charter School Assistant Director. If you go to the next slide, instead with FTEs, and this is really hard to see, hard to encapsulate everything on one slide, but I'll show you the Senate and the House version. What both the Senate and the House did is they gave authority to DPI to reclassify positions to fix the needs that we see. we would argue that we wouldn't request these positions if we didn't already need the positions and we had no other way to restructure this. And we continue to have those conversations with them. But as you can see, the House or the Senate on the left provided just one additional FTE to be reclassified, and that would be a Read to Achieve charter school coordinator. That was one of the positions we requested. And on the House side, it was one position to be a consultant for alternative learning, one position for teacher compensation, ATR consultant, and then one for director of American Indian Education Services. The rest of that provision is exactly the same, and those are instructing DPI, you are not allowed to reclassify a position that is listed in these different agencies within the department. Okay, Senate budget provisions now. The one that's probably the most discussed one right now are the opportunity scholarships. This is also known as the Choose Your School, Choose Your Future bill. Everything is exactly the same as the last time as we discussed. And what you'll see in here, this is not run through the Department of Public Instruction. This is a separate government program for the state. And so the money will go to the Education Savings Authority folks. And what I will say is that the big jump is the year 25-26 when the Opportunity Scholarship, if this were to become law, goes into full effect, where it takes down the requirements that you had to be previously in a school, in a public school, and if you're currently in a private school, you're able to receive the funding. Did we want to, Ms. Candace, did we want to talk about?
Well, I think the issue,
okay.
Part of the issue is where is this money coming from?
Okay, and that's actually a good question. I think with the OSBM report that was put out there, they did recognize that the biggest, in their assessment, that the main impact would not go into effect until the 26-27 school year. And one of those reasons, and I'm going to have Alexis come up here later to talk about some of those provisions, is the funding in arrears. Is that when this goes into effect next school year, the funding in arrears means that the districts are going to be funded from the previous year's ADM. So if there were a bunch of students that left the district, they would not see that reflected until the following school year. I think some of the issues, though, with the OSBM report is that they said that 25, 50, and 75% of the new recipients would be current public school students. Just from the research that we've done from here and what we've seen in other states, we don't know if that's typically what's going to happen. But also with regards to the funding aspect of it, we are about to see a sports gambling bill that I think is being heard in Senate today, where if that were to become law, 50% of all those funding have to go to the general fund. Also, other gambling additions are there, tax revenue as well. But looking at what the state is providing is on the back end for the K-12 system, we've seen an increase in the overall ADM for the schools, and the conversations that we're also having with like the school board association is we understand that this probably will become law, but how do we ensure that that the cost to run a school are not impacted when you see some students leave? There's a baseline that it costs to run the school no matter how many students you have in there. And I think those are the conversations that the General Assembly is going to be having over the next 2 years as we see what the interest is in this program. What I can tell you is from other states, specifically Arizona, who just did a similar thing, there was a 4% increase of people who accessed these scholarships that were higher than the year before from public schools. Not the 25 to 75% that the projections in the OSBM report.
So what does that mean?
Yes, sir.
So that's a huge gap. And what does that mean to the average person? People don't understand percentages a lot. So what is that delta? What does that big gap mean? As far as the reality of what you think is going to
Well, I think it's very telling in the OSBM report. They even said, and I'll read the exact line here, it says it's difficult to predict with certainty. So I think what they're doing is they're forecasting if this were to happen, and I have to believe their numbers. OSBM puts out great numbers. But what we're seeing in the trends across the country when they implement this, the overwhelming amount of funds that this goes towards are people that are currently in the private school already. That makes sense? Okay. And not the projections that we're seeing here. And just as a side note, we've been looking into this. The superintendent was very interested and concerned about this when it was proposed, and she asked us to do a lot of research with our team. And we've actually reached out to private schools across the state and just to see, like, do you even have capacity? Do you have a wait list? And almost all of them have a wait list. We stopped counting after probably 20, 30 districts that we went to. They either have a wait list or they have very few spots left to let in there other than their pre-K, which is a rolling, or pre-K or kindergarten, which is always a rolling thing. So it will be interesting over the next 2 years to see how many students actually leave the public school to access these funds. And I'll, as another anecdote, when we were talking with, I think it was like Florida and Arizona, and I have to believe this too, I think a lot of people like their public schools. And so even if this opportunity presents itself, they're going to stay, and that's why that 4% uptick. Geez, I keep hitting that. Even though that 4% uptick is what we were seeing. 0 to 5% is what we're seeing across the nation.
Follow up.
Yes, sir.
So, based on what you've said, you do not think that a large percentage of people are going to leave public school to avail themselves of this opportunity?
I can't speak for me personally. I'm just going off of the data that we're seeing nationwide, and just the fact that there's wait lists and that there's very few spots to even get kids enrolled into private schools that are already there. The amount of the money that we've seen from other states that this happens is it goes towards people that are already enrolled in those private schools. When you eliminate that requirement that you had to be in the public school system beforehand.
And last follow-up. So if you carry that to a conclusion, what do you think is going to happen? I mean, is there going to be people applying for these scholarships that there's not going to be enough money available for them? Is there going to be supplantation from us? I mean, just, that's what I'm trying to get at. What do you think the end looks like, given the fact these numbers are so far apart?
I don't think I'm qualified to give that response.
Can I respond?
But, okay.
So what I would say, based on the information that we have, and based on the lack of availability of spots in private schools in our state right now, based on our scan of the state, what we're saying is that there are not enough places in private schools for new families to leave their public schools and avail themselves of private schools. And that most of these dollars that are not coming out of the pot of state funds, these are new dollars from the general fund, will be used for families who are already using a $5,000 opportunity scholarship to pay for private school.
May I ask a question? So just to follow up on the superintendent's point, do we have any idea of how many students are already taking advantage of that $5,000 opportunity?
We could ask
I'd like to know that.
state education agency.
Since we don't run that program, I just don't know.
Right, but you could find out.
Yeah, we could find out. There is money that does revert back because it's not all access. And when I asked them about that, because I said, do you even have a wait list right now for opportunity scholarships? And what they said is how the law is currently drafted is a lot of parents, they apply for an opportunity scholarship waiting to get into a charter school or waiting to see where they get zoned for their traditional school. And if you get an opportunity scholarship and then you decide to use another public option, that money just goes back into the pot and they're not allowed to give that money back out. So that's another thing I think that they're looking at is does that money keep rolling, or once you apply for it, that money's spoken for regardless if you use it or not.
That figure is available. I've seen it, but I can't tell you the name of it. But anyway,
okay.
Let's roll on.
Could we ask one more thing on this?
Oh, surely. I'm sorry.
Correct me if I'm wrong about this. The cap is, as you indicated, in a year or two, cap for income is going to come off in order to apply for the scholarships.
but it will be tiered.
Right.
Yes.
So the amounts will be tiered, but the cap will be off.
Yes.
So there may be a large number of students who are already in the private schools who don't receive anything now, but will be able to receive something then.
Yes.
And they may apply such that certain organizations have sent out letters encouraging legislators to pass this, or encouraging their constituents to urge legislators to pass this for the financial solvency of their private schools.
I can't speak for that, but what you said is true, that they can access the funds. I believe, I need to go back and read it, but I believe that you have to, they give priority to if you're free and reduced lunch is how they're deciding all this. So if you are at the poverty level, so I think the priority goes to the most at need, and then it keeps going down as funds become available. But I can't speak to that.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Ms. Gaines.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just one other comment. The bottom line to me here still is there's large amounts of money being put into this pot that aren't, this is where the money is gonna be sitting, whether it gets used or not. This money could be used for other much more dire educational needs across our state, but it's not being used. So it is in some ways a minus from what we might have been able to access in more productive ways. Just say that. Okay.
Okay, well said.
I was thinking down the same lines with the past or whatever, the Andrew efforts and the money owed to the schools, and most of all, teachers' salaries would be among those needs and others. And that's my thoughts and my concerns with it. I mean, I don't mind the people needing and getting help, but when you go way out on a limb, you should be going out for the teachers, in my opinion.
What's also in the Senate version of the what's the name of of Choose Your School, Choose Your Future provision that is not being discussed as much, but does have significant impact on the state board. And we briefly discussed this when I was remote last month meeting, but I just want to make sure it's highlighted because I could see this does have legs, and I could see a provision like this showing up in the budget. It would require the state board to create a track for students to graduate within 3 years that districts must honor for students down at the local level, so that if you are a high flyer or you're able to get you have a military orders or you're able to get in college earlier, that you would be able to go after your junior year. And not only that, you would receive a scholarship, if you look at the last bullet point, for those 2 semesters that you would have been in the public high school. So that we are continuing to monitor that. I think the concern, if there is one, with the main one with them, is to ensure that students who do take advantage of this, they could be 16 to 17 years old, and to ensure that they actually have a path forward rather than just giving them a diploma and say, congratulations, you're not even a legal adult yet, but go out there and take on the world. So to at least have a requirement in there that they at least have an exit interview or have some type of a plan with their career development plan on where they're going after they graduate within 3 years. All right. Another provision that has raised some concern for the department is the redefining what a career development coordinator is. Just to summarize this, it allows career development coordinators to be used more as counselors, as you can see in that provision 1. The concern that we have, especially when I'm talking with Trey Michael in our CTE department, is when we're advocating for career development plans and we're trying to beef up that support, is now you're going to change the dynamic of what a career development coordinator is supposed to be doing inside the school building. And if they have other duties, then they're not going to be able to provide the support that they need for the career development plans. So we've asked that we revisit this maybe in the short session, but that we've requested that this change to what a CDC does, that it be removed, and we're hopeful that it does not end up in the final version of the conference report. Okay, school support changes, and this is what I was discussing earlier. I think for time purposes, let's just scroll down and be easier just to look at the next slide. So what you'll see if you, here we go. So if you were to look at the money report of the budget, you would, and you didn't go down one more item, you would say, oh my goodness, they're taking away almost $300 million for school support staff. What they're doing now is, because the school support staff are the specific positions of the school nurses and counselors and social workers, they're combining that with the allotment for school psychologists too. And I know this is something that the state board had been advocating for, where those positions that were sitting there, and in some of our more rural counties where you can't hire a school psychologist, well, let us go hire someone else that could benefit the students. So this would lump that in there. You could be able to use the allotment to do what you would like to do best for your district. But also they provided 120 additional positions for what they say are for nurses, but they could be used for anything that the districts would want. And so this is, I guess, a move in the right direction. We're still advocating that there be at least a nurse and possibly a social worker in all of our schools, but at least they have, at least in the Senate budget, they've provided the extra 120. Yes?
Just to make sure I'm understanding this correctly, there is 10 million for extra 120 positions.
Yes.
Previously. But am I understanding that the rest of it is just going to be moved from instructional support allotment to?
It's going to give the flexibility. It's going to give the flexibility to the districts to decide how they want to utilize those positions.
I guess what I should ask is, what does the instructional support allotment do now? That's what
Up above, it's support allotment, so school nurses, school counselors, and social workers.
Okay, so
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Just, I didn't.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry about that.
It wasn't clear to me. I wasn't clear what that currently was. Okay, thank you.
All right, next one. And just, this is the eliminate the copay for reduced price meals. I already discussed this, so we can go to the next one. This is an interesting one. No penalty for unpaid meal debt. So in the House provision, they wanted to wipe clean the meal debt. But in this one, if there is still, in the Senate version, if there's still meal debt, students could not be held responsible for their parents not paying off their meal debt. So that way they can still get their transcript, they can still walk at graduation, and all the other things. All right. This one's an interesting provision. It would instruct the department to create a remote instruction flexibility plan. What's just interesting about this is when Freebird and I were working together, coming out of the pandemic, this was kind of one of those things that we had suggested to the General Assembly of, hey, districts like the flexibility of having remote days and having kids learning asynchronously. What are your thoughts on it? At the time, the General Assembly was like, no, we want our kids back in school full time. And now I think they're seeing the benefit of giving the more of these type of days to students. So we'll continue to monitor this, but it only allows up to 10 local school districts to get the 5 extra days for that flexibility. And then one that's caught a lot of attention is the prohibition against 3Qing, with the science of reading being mandated by the state. I think that the Senate is trying to ensure that the science of reading is what is used. I know we had discussed some of the locals' input on it. I will just leave it at that, unless there's any conversation.
I'll leave that one alone too.
Okay. And then this one's a minor one, but the PD for Holocaust education, we've been, because of when the budget was signed, November of 2021, our team has been working, Christy Day and her team have been working overdrive to try to get this through, but we just run out of time to do the professional development side of things. So we went to the GA and we said, either we need $250,000 or just give us non-reversion language so we can continue the PD, and they said, we'll give you non-reversion language. So that's why that one's in there. And then advanced teaching roles. This is the first step towards pathways, in our opinion, with the first time that the state has even suggested providing those leadership bonuses or those supplemental pay coming from the state level instead of having all of our ATR districts who currently have to use local funds to pay this. It's about $10 million that the Senate is proposing in this. And as you can see, $10,000 for adult leadership teachers and $3,000 for classroom excellence teachers. I know in the committee call, it was discussed, well, how do we how do we know what districts are calling their teachers and how does this line up? Talking with Tom Tomberlin is we would review their proposals and see with what the legislation says, if whatever they call their teacher, if that equals what an adult leadership teacher would be, and then they would qualify for the funding. So we were very pleased to see this in the budget, and a very good first step. I don't know if you want to say anything else about it. Okay. All right. Okay, and then what I'm going to do real quick with Alexis is that there's been some chatter, I guess I should say, throughout the state about 3 really specific provisions. I briefly touched on funding and arrears, but I'd like for her to just talk to you from a school business side of the AIG funding proposal that's in there, and then the supplemental funds for teacher compensation. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Alexis Schaus. So, yes, Jamie, we've obviously been working together throughout this session on many of the items you discussed, but these 3 items in particular, there has been kind of a lot of questions from the field. The first one, it relates to codifying the AIG, the academically and intellectually gifted formula. You'll notice that actually in both the House and the Senate budget, there has been an interest in codifying. That means putting things, as opposed to being in the special provisions and the appropriations bill every biennium, they actually put it into the general statutes and law. And what this does is it kind of, obviously, it eliminates the need to repeat these provisions every 2 years, but it makes it also a lot easier to reference the items. When you're in a different provision, you can reference the general statute. It's a lot easier. So you'll see for low-wealth supplemental funding, small county, the disadvantaged student supplemental funding, and EC, as well as AIG. So the first section of this provision just codifies the boilerplate language, and that is a flat rate amount for 4% of the population. Regardless of identification. There is an additional item that was added in the Senate budget that directs the Department of Public Instruction to come up with a definition of AIG for students. And there is language in there that states that it would be an intent for that identification to be used for funding purposes. We did get clarification. It would not change the formula and the funding for this coming year. But when we look at Senate Bill 670, which is the weighted student funding formula bill that did not make crossover, but it is no surprise to any of us that there is a strong interest in going to that type of formula where the funding is determined by the characteristics of the student. So the 2023-24 funding would not be impacted, but that definition would be required if the Senate budget was to become law. The second item is the supplemental funds for teacher compensation. This should not be confused with low wealth supplemental funding. A lot of people are referring to this as kind of the low wealth compensation. Actually, this funding is the $170 million that goes out to all districts, with the exception of 4, and the charter schools and lab schools that are located within those counties. This funding started 2 years ago in 2022, and it was $100 million at that time. That was the year of the late budget, and there was language that was put in there. Let's just say we didn't get to review it before it became law. It is a little bit complex in its calculation, but also there is a supplanting provision within that. The Senate budget and the House budget actually simplifies that calculation. And that is a real plus. We like that. And there is also a clarification on the supplanting requirement. The supplanting in the old law and last biennium was a little bit confusing. It does state that the districts have to use the funds to supplement and not supplant non-state funds. So that is their local and federal funds. And you will see in BizOp 5 there is a required report related to this, actually the whole program, the supplemental funds as well as the supplanting provision. There was actually some additions and clarification in both the House and the Senate. The additions provided a 5% kind of threshold for that supplanting. So, if you were over by $100, you didn't lose your entire allotment the next year. It actually comes within that 95% rule, which is consistent with the supplanting requirements of our low wealth supplemental funding and small county. There is also an allowability for the school district to remedy the situation, right? It does not define how it is to remedy. That would be up to the State Board of Education. Again, we have that for our low wealth supplanting provision and our small county provision. And so the school district, if they were to have deemed to have been supplanted, they would have an ability to remedy that and not lose those funds. And then thirdly, it did clarify the calculation of that supplanting. And so that is a positive, and that, when that becomes law, will be the law that determines if these school districts, the calculation for if they are eligible for funding in the 24 school year. I go into depth with that because, as I said, with BizOp 5, you will see a list of 20 school districts at this point that are deemed to have supplanted funds for various reasons, but really, I think as we stated before, not an intentional and not at the detriment of the teacher's pay. And then the third item is funding in arrears. This is actually a provision that back in February 2021, and I'm looking at Ms. White here because I do believe that she was very excited when I gave this presentation. Was like, well, when is this going to happen? And of course, we had the COVID collapse of ADM and all the rest of it. But back in February of 2021, I actually presented to you on how we have allotted ADM and what that is. And it's like the higher of our projection and our actual 2 years. And then during the year, depending on how the actual comes in, districts are actually reduced or add money in the middle of their budget year, of their active year. Which, needless to say, makes it very difficult for school districts to be able to hire with confidence. And there's also kind of the charter school funding is also intertwined with the school district funding. So the funding in arrears basically says, you know what, public school units, all of them, will be funded initially based on their prior year actual average daily membership. So at this, in October of the year, a school district would know at a minimum what they would receive for that next following year, what their average daily membership, what the budget is going to be based on. And if their actual average daily membership came in less, then they would not see a reduction in that year. And if it came in more, then they would receive additional funding. And what this legislation says is that basically DPI will come up with a model and to be able to do this, and we would track all the legislation that needed to be changed in order for this to happen. I think that DPI, the LEAs, the charter schools, this isn't something that we have not spoken about. Probably since 2016, I've had a lot of support for this, but now is a very good time and a good opportunity to actually modify this, our allotted ADM, and it will reduce our administration as well as provide a lot. It will enable the school districts to have much better resource planning than they do currently. So,
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
I think I'm just going to go I'm going to read real quick on the bills that have not moved, but I know these are some that you all ask me each meeting. The constitutional amendment about electing the state board and then making the superintendent the chair still has not moved out of rules, but it's not subject to crossover. So at any point between now and the next election, that could pop up. And then what is interesting is that the House and the Senate have very similar bills about teacher licensures, specifically on the renewable side of it. And they've had two separate bills. They both made crossover, and they're both sitting in there, so we will continue to monitor that. The Fairness in Women's Sports Act has not moved either the House or the Senate version, and so that's the next slide as well. And then the entry fees for high school athletic events has not moved. And then some of the charter bills, real quick, the remote virtual charter academy is still sitting in House rules. It has not been concurred yet. We will continue to monitor that on if that gets put into another bill or if it eventually gets voted on. And then the final two, the charter omnibus bill has not moved since it's passed the House. So everything that we discussed last meeting is still the same. And then what was interesting is the last slide is the Charter School Review Board was referred to Senate Ed for today, and it was removed yesterday evening. So I would assume that they're working through bill drafting on something, and so we might see that pop up as early as next week.
Any other questions at this time? Hearing none, that's it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, great. We'll move now to business operations with Vice Chair Duncan.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hall. And
I think there's...
Oh, I'm sorry. Trying to make us some time. We also have one consent item. We have two names that will be coming before the board for approval tomorrow, Dr. Flemings and Dr. Lanier, who was being asked to, I'm sorry. Dr. Miller, go right ahead.
You're good. You're good. That's exactly what I was going to say. So we have Mr. Bill Lanier of Onslow County Schools. He would fill the School Boards Association seat for the Military Interstate Children's Compact Commission, or the MIC3. And then Dr. Aaron Fleming would fill the superintendent's seat on that council. And those are the two recommendations we're bringing forward.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lanier is a 20-year Marine veteran.
Vice Chair Duncan.
thank you. We have 5 action on first reading items for the BizOp committee. The first BizOp 1 is approval of contracts over $500,000. We have 5 of them. We're well prepped for 1-minute drill. Our first item is the East Scholar Cedars contract, and Diane Delaney for the Office of Data Reporting and Privacy is here to present this item. Welcome.
Good afternoon. It's nice to see all of you. Cedars is a long-standing data warehouse we've had for over 10 years. It is how we produce all of our federal reporting, and it is also the data source for NC Schoolworks, which is our longitudinal data system that connects with our higher ed partners and also with our workforce data. This is our same vendor, eScholar, that we've used since the beginning. Do you all have any questions about that?
Not seeing any. Thank you very much for the report.
Thank you.
Our next item is a contract with the Friday Institute on School Connect. It's a school connectivity contract. Dr. Vanessa Wren, our Chief Information Officer, is here to report on this item. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you, Vice Chair. I'm pitch hitting for Matthew Mayo. He is our new Director of School Connectivity. He comes to us from Wilson County Schools, and he's the former technology director there. So this is a 3-year contract with the Friday Institute for school connectivity work in the amount of $850,000, $237, approximately $275,000 a year. And this is a partnership with the Friday Institute, and it allows us to maximize our E-rate filings and our analysis. Specifically, Dr. Ray Zeiss, who I know you all know, who has reported here before, their work has made North Carolina a leader in recovering those universal service fees that all North Carolinians pay on their phone bills, being able to get those back. We have been able to, for every $1 of state funding, we are delivering $3.44 of federal funding in eligible goods and E-rate with this contract.
Thank you, Dr. Wren. I asked her specifically to have that number so people would realize how important this contract is for us, and thank you for the work that goes into it.
Thank you.
Our next contract is the DIT convenience contract for unique identifier system, and Julian Alhauer is here to report on that. He's our director of the Office of Enterprise Systems. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Just a quick correction. This is not a convenience contract. It is a new contract that we're establishing. I reached out to Maria earlier, and I think it got updated just earlier today.
Sorry, I didn't get that word. I apologize.
No, I just for record. But this is for the establishing of a new contract with eScholar for the student UID and staff system. This is where we assign UIDs to student and staff for the purpose of reporting, linking mainly students from pre-K to workspace, used with our data warehousing, and also it's used operationally by the PSUs for their identities, like their login names, etc., their lunch numbers. It's hosted at DIT, and this is a licensing and support contract.
All right, and the dollar amount involved?
I honestly forgot the total for this one. It's around 300,000, but it's we're asking for 1 year and 2 years optional.
So it's a total of 3 years potentially.
Yeah.
And this is a move that's been in progress for a while to better connect all the way from pre-K all the way into career.
Hopefully the workspace, yes.
So, yes, and so that's just something we've been working at for a while. It's actually a very important initiative long term. So any questions on it?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Treasurer.
Since my time on the school board in the early 90s, I've been working on and dealing with unique student identifiers. What's unique about it?
What's unique about this one? Actually, it's unique because it starts closest to the student as possible. The old way we used to do it at the state level. Once we deployed the current SIS, Power School, we implemented it where when they see the white of the kid's eyes, they're entering the data, they're closest to that kid, they can verify if Julian with an E is the same as Julian with an A. Right? They can say, they get the near match pop up in their screen right then and there. And that actually caused us to be leaders among other states.
Just one quick follow-up.
Yes, please.
And how is this G-hauling with the community college system where I also sit on the board?
We are closely working currently with the community colleges system and the UNC system. As a matter of fact, I was speaking to our general counsel just earlier about that, where we're going to increase the adoption. Originally, us, GPI, Community Colleges System, the UNC system, DHHS for early childhood, and GDAC, and independent colleges and universities, we all agreed to partner together and use that same system. Of course, there are other systems that people are pitching from other entities. The issue became that our PSUs started using it operationally quicker than community colleges for obvious reasons, or universities. They start using it as the lunch number, as their NCAD Cloud login. So we had to make sure we remove duplicates, resolve them in real time, not to impact the schools operationally. The university system and the community colleges did not have that ability, but we're currently working with them to enhance that process via a new MOU that we're starting with them.
Community college is also adopting a new system, so just make sure it's
They are.
very concerned about all this, so thank you.
Thank you. And the Teach and See study that was done, also the UID is a core part of it. It is pretty much described as the glue that's going to tie everything together.
Any other
Mr.
questions? All right, thank you very much. We now move on to our fourth contract, which is, I believe, a DIT convenience contract, unless that's changed. It's called No B4. And we have Tim Weiss, our Director of PSU IT Security Specialist, and from the Cybersecurity section. This is your first time here, so we welcome you and appreciate your work.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate the time. This requested purchase would allow us to continue providing No Before for cybersecurity training and phishing simulation in and around our PSUs. This is done through a DIT contract with an amendment to allow us to purchase this for the PSUs at a cost for the year of $554,383.33. Currently, we have 100 PSUs utilizing the platform for a mixture of cybersecurity training and or phishing simulations, with about 318,000 completed training courses and over 1.1 million delivered phishing simulations to those PSUs.
Questions or comments? This is the human operation part of cybersecurity.
Yes, sir.
All right, not hearing any, thank you.
Thank you.
And our final contract, again, I believe the DIT convenience contract, this is the Microsoft Imagine Academy renewal for 2023-24, and Trey Michael is from our Office of CTE is here to report on this contract.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. This is the renewal of our Microsoft Imagine Academy Access Agreement. It provides about 260 licenses to our districts at a cost of about $2,700 per, which the street price per is about $3,700, so significant savings there to them. It provides access to certifications, to the content within the Microsoft Imagine Academy, which they're changing the name to that, so I don't want to misspeak on that today. And it also affords those districts that have these in those schools much of the same tools that we use here at DPI in the Office 365 portal. And the discount then extends if they would choose to make further other purchases at that same roughly 30% discount.
Questions or comments on this?
Just
Dr. Oxendine.
just a very quick question. Thank you so much, Mr. Michael. My question is, who at the district, or maybe it's at the school level, who's over that? Who operates it?
So what we do, we have actually with Certiport and Microsoft a program manager that actually monitors and helps distribute the vouchers, the site licenses, and so forth. And we work with the districts to help them do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Anything else for Trey Michael on this topic? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
On all 5 of these, I want to report that these contracts are consistent in pricing generally with contracts that have preceded them. And I think there's a strong effort been made by the department to get the best contracts available and be careful stewards of the public's funds. I think it's important to say those things as we talk about some significant contracts, each of these being in excess of $500,000 and sometimes well in excess of that. BizOp 2 is an approval of digital learning initiative contracts for public school units. This is not our first round of this. Lindsay Sipe is here to present it, and I know she's going to be able to do it very efficiently because it's not our first round. Welcome.
Thank you so much for your time today. It's my pleasure to bring to you the recommendations for the DLI grants that we are looking forward to awarding today. The funding began in 2017, and I'm continuously in awe of the work that is being done and the grants that are being put forward. Just to put into context, historically, we usually have between 30 and 40 grant applications. This year we had 87 very high quality grant applications that came out. The quality and the bar continues to grow each and every year, and we're very thankful for that. As a quick reminder, we have 3 different types of grants that were opened up during the RFP process: emerging, implementation, and professional learning grants. We're going to start with the emerging technology grants, which were created to utilize emerging technology and developing innovative practices. We had 31 applicants, and we're recommending 12. And this is 1 year of funding for up to $50,000 per PSU. So if you take a moment, the next 3 slides share some of the work that you can expect to see coming from the Emerging Technologies Grant. That includes several esports grants: design thinking, podcasting, STEM on the go mobiles, robotics, drones, an inflatable planetarium that I am personally excited to see, Lego education training, artificial intelligence training for staff members, VR headsets, and professional development that aligns with those as well. So we're excited to see those things happening. Next, we're going to talk about professional learning grants. So these are 1-year grants that are built to help PSUs facilitate implementation of professional learning that best supports their school district. This year we had 24 total applications, and we are taking 3 to you all and recommending 3. This is for funding for 1 year for up to $30,000 per PSU. So on the next slide, you'll see Cabarrus County is implementing a training program where they are going to help teachers integrate science into their classes in a way to better prepare students for the job market and better prepare them for computer science related jobs and standards. Davidson County Schools is providing intentionally targeted district-wide for K-12 media center and media specialists in the area of digital citizenship. So they'll have opportunities to collaborate and come together to learn more about how they can better teach digital citizenship in their district. Carteret County Schools is proposing teacher leaders engage in professional learning with book studies and coming together to develop expertise as coaches in the realm of digital teaching and learning. And then finally, we have the impact grants. These are 3-year grants, and they are up to $95,000 per PSU. We are recommending 3 to be onboarded this year, and then we're also planning the continuation of the 3 impact grants that will continue through 2025. So that started last year. So those 3 that started last year are Caldwell County, Mount Airy City Schools, and Davie County. On the next slide, you'll see the 3 that we're recommending to add this year, which is Asheboro City Schools. So they have a whole slew of things that they're going to develop and work on, including makerspace, esports, robotics, 3D printing stations, and a learning space where folks can come together to learn more about these digital practices and start utilizing them in their classroom. Ardell Statesville Schools is a Skills on Wheel mobile, which is a STEM career lab, which will go out into the community, out into the schools to help with STEM careers. And then Winston-Salem, Forsyth County, is proposing a grant that supports the opening of an experiential learning middle school that's grounded in design thinking, project-based learning, and digital learning standards for students. So if you look at the very last slide that we have here, we are excited about the continued spread of the DLI grants, and it's something that we work very hard to strive and make sure that we have an impact across the entire state and across each region. The total amount of spending for DLI grants this year is about $1.24 million, what we are proposing to put back into the public schools. Any questions?
Questions or comments on this? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate the report. Our next item is BizOp 3, and this again is one that we're familiar with and have heard about before, but it's a very important one for the board. It's the McKinney-Vento Subgrant Award recommendations for 2023 through 2026. Our presenter is Lisa Phillips, who's the state coordinator for the education of homeless children and youth. And she's at the Serve Center at UNCG and has been with us on several occasions in the past. Welcome. It's nice to see you again.
Good afternoon. It's nice to see everyone. As you stated, I'm the state coordinator for the homeless education program. We are identifying currently over 30,000 children in our schools as of today, this school year, as being homeless. Our numbers are continuing to grow, and our children are staying in situations of homelessness much longer. So this is very important, the funding that we're going to be discussing today. The funding is through the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act, which authorizes the Federal Education for Homeless Children and Youth program, and it is the primary piece of federal legislation related to the education of children and youth who are experiencing homelessness. Next slide. The U.S. Department of Ed provides funding to North Carolina to enable us, the Department of Public Instruction, as well as local educational agencies, to implement the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. The McKinney-Vento Act includes provisions to ensure that children and youth experiencing homelessness are provided with a free, appropriate public education and have equal opportunity to enroll and succeed in school. Next slide. The North Carolina, I'm trying to make sure I stay up with you. The North Carolina Homeless Education Program distributes funds to LEAs through a competitive subgrant process as mandated by the McKinney-Vento Act. It is a 3-year subgrant cycle that's going to be covering the 23-24 school year, 24-25, and the 25-26 academic years. Receipts of the McKinney-Vento subgrant funds is contingent upon compliance with the federal law and state mandates. Districts must adhere to the terms and activities specified in the proposal as it was approved unless they want to submit an amendment and make a change, and evidence that their expenditures are in compliance with what they said they were going to do. As far as the eligibility to apply, districts needed to have at least 50 children that they had identified as experienced in homelessness. This also includes that charter schools, if they had 50 or more. If they did not, then they could work together as a consortium and apply for funding.
If we could stop on that slide. Go ahead.
Okay.
So the bullet point that suggests an individual charter school would identify as many as 50 homeless students seems to me to be an inappropriate number.
Which is why the consortia follows, where charter schools in an area can get together if they combine to get to 50. So I'm going to just make up a hypothetical, and Dr. Phillips, please tell me.
We could have anywhere from 2, 3, 5, 6 plus schools, including charter schools that come together to make 50 or more students so that they can apply for the funding.
And I appreciate the explanation, but given the somewhat contentious relationships sometimes between LEAs and the charter schools which fall within those LEAs, I would hope that we could be creative in making sure that students and families who are homeless are not penalized by the only opportunity for a charter school to qualify as if they group with others. That seems to me, that seems to be unfair, because we are talking about families who need services. We are talking about students who are in state, can't even talk. I get upset. That does not fit for me at all. Can you help?
Yes, we do have charter schools that are identifying 50 plus students as experiencing homelessness in their buildings. In fact, our virtual schools identifying over 70 children as of today that are experiencing homelessness. So we do have charters that have more than 50. Certainly, we have our charter schools that may only have 3 or 5, and they are working with other districts so that they can increase awareness and build on their strategies. We also try to provide additional support to our charter schools to ensure that whether they have funding or not, this applies to our school districts that don't maybe receive the funding or don't apply, we're going to do everything we can to still support them.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
And we did ask, I guess it was during the last subgrant cycle, to conduct mini grants for our charter schools, that they had to identify at least 1 or more children as homeless to receive some seed money to help build their programs.
A clarifying question I wanted to ask, and it may go to part of Ms. White's point, certainly not all of it. But let's just say you happen to be in an area, let's say Mecklenburg County, that has a large number of charter schools within the county. Can charter schools in Mecklenburg County create a consortia such that they would then be eligible without involving an LEA if that was their desire?
Yes, the charters do not have to apply with consortiums. LEAs to be a consortium. Charters usually do their own consortium together and not with the local school district.
That might help.
Is that what you're looking for?
That helps. So
Okay.
a group of charter schools could gather together and that would qualify.
Absolutely,
Not
absolutely, yes. They do not, and typically the local school districts do not want to apply with the charters.
So what I think through you here
Makes your point. Yeah,
was,
sorry.
thank you, Ms. Phillips, the committee showed an amazing command of the English language and knew the plural of consortium. As consortia. So, I'm just kidding. Thank you for that explanation. I hope that makes you feel a little bit better.
That helps, thank you.
And to help you feel a little bit better, just as a side note, we do have 16 charter schools that came together to form a consortium with ARP money, specific for homeless, and so they're doing remarkable work, and we can share that at a later time with you.
Which we would like. We'd like when you come share what's going on in that area. All right,
Okay.
so keep going. Thank you for the pause.
Sure, and the grantees, districts, they applied for funds based on the counts of the students that they have identified during the last school year. That was of certified data with the Department of Education. So we had to use whatever number we had certified by them. So that came to the 21-22 school year, not last school year. And then, of course, they would align their accounts by the different tiers. As far as the funding guidelines, which is our next slide, the funding guidelines consisted of districts utilizing a program-specific needs assessment as part of their application. This helped them to identify what needs they have in their district, what funding sources they may have available, and where the gaps are. They also had to include underserved populations of students, and they had to look at the graduation rates, the success of the students in school, all their academics, to see whether or not they were on target for the school year or if they needed additional support. The needs assessment is a requirement across the board in all of our school districts, including the charter schools, when it comes to the McKinney-Vento program. Services provided with McKinney-Vento funds, they cannot replace the regular academic program, and they must be designed to expand upon or improve services provided to our homeless students as part of the school's regular academic program, including compliance with McKinney-Vento statutes. Services can be provided either on school grounds or maybe in the community. We have a lot of our districts partnering with like the Salvation Army or shelters to provide the services to our students. Basically, they're going out to where our students and their families may be. Even in some of the parks, they'll go out and provide services if needed. LEAs must use McKinney-Vento subgrant funds to assist homeless children and youth with enrolling, attending, and succeeding in school. In particular, the funds can be used to specifically support those students that are even at risk of failing, that have been identified as homeless. So school districts can earmark money specifically for that group of students, to defray the excess cost of transportation, to provide services for early learners, whether they're in preschool or not, to take it beyond preschool if needed, or to provide a service because the child cannot get into a program. They can use their resources to meet those needs. And then also to serve and also retain our students that are on their own. They're called unaccompanied homeless youth. And so we want to do everything we can to keep them in school and engaged. And so a lot of our school districts will use money for that. Adaptation of space and purchases of school supplies and needed materials to support our students and their success in school is probably one of the largest purchases that are made with these resources. And of course, providing support for extraordinary or emergency assistance to our students when they have a need. For these activities, as well as others that are prescribed in the law, the following applications were submitted. So that would take us to the next slide. On this slide, it just represents the percentage of applicants per region. But if we look at the next slide, we have more specific details there. This slide represents the total applications received per region. There were 59 applications that were successfully submitted. Out of those, 13 applicants scored below 80 and are not included in the recommendations. Next slide. The recommendation for 46 LEAs comes out to $2,700,000. Our state allocation is estimated to be at $3.5 million, which is on the next slide if you'd like to go to that. From these funds, 75% of them are required to go out to our school districts in a competitive process, which is the competition and our recommendations are aligning with. The activities that our districts want to use the resources on actually went beyond 75%, so we have actually 76.5% of our funding that we want to allocate to our school districts. 23.5% of the allocations are used to run the state program, but more importantly, to do the following activities that are on the next slide. And they consist of providing training, and this means also going into our school districts and providing training to them, offering anywhere from district-wide to community-based to individual groups, providing technical assistance in the identification, enrollment, and of course the success of our students in school, program development, disputes, managing those, collaboration, monitoring our Title I. But more importantly, we're focusing on providing information sessions and training that's required of our homeless liaisons on an annual basis. In federal law, it says that we must do these things, the training, the technical assistance, information sessions, and the compliance forms. We provide regional rounds with our liaisons and their partners out in the field so that they can look at what the needs are and identify where support needs to be provided. Additionally, other workshops, whether it's specific to their data and understanding it, development of policies and procedures, working with single points of contact, which are located on our higher ed campuses, and supporting our children as they transition, say, from high school over to college, building those relationships, helping them understand and know what it is they need to be doing and what the law says. That's all part of this work. We also help our liaisons, and we'll provide to them donations, whether they are used with remaining sources that we have available with the state allocation, or if they are given to us from our national partners. We've been fortunate in the past to work hand in hand with Feed the Children, as well as Kits for Kids and E2D out of Charlotte. Working with other partnerships across the state as well as nationally is a priority in our work, and this has really helped our liaisons to build their knowledge base, also develop their leadership skills by giving them opportunities to not only work directly with them, but maybe be involved in like state or national presentations with our office. We do support our school districts, and this money would also be earmarked for it to help with the Title I set-asides, 21st century partnerships, migrant, CTE, EC services, transportation, child nutrition, the list goes on and on. But the biggest piece is any resources remaining if we are not providing any of these services, that we're also providing the opportunity for mini grants to support those who are only identifying a few children so that they have seed money. Certainly a lot of our school districts have ART 1 and ART 2 money, but that money is going to run out. So what can we do to continue to support them and provide them with the sources they need to truly meet the needs of their students? So with that, sorry, it was a little long-winded. I hope that you'll look at the recommendations and support us in improving those that are listed.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Oxendine.
Thank you so much for that thorough presentation. This particular program just kind of touches my heart. My question is, you made a statement a few minutes ago in your response to Ms. White's question, something about having homeless children being located in a virtual charter. How does their learning take place?
Well, it can happen in many ways. Maybe that a parent is on the run. I hate to use that language, but because I see that as a bit of slang, but very transient and not being able to truly meet the needs of their child. But they do have maybe the devices that have been provided to them to connect. And so as the family's having to move from one location to another, the child's still able to be connected to school. Additionally, it's allowed students who have had issues where maybe they've become caretakers of younger siblings or even their parents, be able to still be connected to school and participate fully.
That is dedication to education, isn't it?
Our liaisons and their administration have been incredibly creative in the way that they meet the needs of our students who are experiencing homelessness. I mean, this is just a little tiny piece of the larger picture of what everyone's doing. And in fact, you had suggested the last time I was here about the billboards and what have you. So our districts decided they wanted to make it even more personable. And so they are doing that in the local districts, on the campuses, like with the signs that you put in the yard, like a for sale sign, but it has the information and links and cubes so parents, students can connect, but also billboards that are specific to the communities. So we're doing that across the state. Thank you for that recommendation, by the way.
Other questions? Thank you very much for this report, which is something that's very important to us, as I said before, so we really appreciate it and look forward to hearing an interim report about the work that's being done.
Be happy to provide that. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. All right, go on to Biz Op 4 as we all recover our emotions from that very meaningful report. Biz Op 4, which is our last action on first reading, is ESSER 3 funding request. We have Mike Marr here, who's a regular, but we also have Dr. Rachel Wright Jr., who's not, and who we want to welcome today, and very glad she's here.
Yeah, I just wanted to take a second to introduce Rachel as the new director of the Office of Learning and Recovery. So she's not new to the agency, but she's new to this role in the OLR. She's hit the ground running and has an incredible skill set that has been really valuable in the last few weeks in which she has kind of taken the helm of that role. So I'm going to turn this one over to her.
Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Davis, Vice Chair Duncan, Superintendent Truitt, board members and advisors. Again, my name is Rachel Wright Junio. I am the new director of the Office of Learning, Recovery, and Acceleration, and today I'm presenting a request to transfer $2,079,745 of unobligated ESSER 3 state set-aside funds to increase funding for PRC 188. Those are our summer career accelerator programs. You all may be familiar with those, may have heard about them in the past. Under PRC 177. Those were funded under ESSER 2. So we are requesting the additional funding to go to PRC 188, which are the ESSER 3 funds. As a reminder, the purpose of the Career Accelerator programs is to fund high-quality, evidence-based learning and workforce-aligned programs in the summer to address the academic impact of lost instructional time and to respond to the academic, social, emotional, and mental health needs of students in grades 6 through 12. These additional funds are going to be allocated to 110 traditional PSUs and 65 charter, regional, or lab schools. I've listed those PSUs by region further down in the presentation, beginning on slide 7 for traditional PSUs, and then all of the charters are listed beginning on slide 16. And these additional funds are going to be allocated using the existing allotment policy that we already have for this PRC. Our rationale for requesting this transfer is that these summer programs have been successful and have had an impact on the field, on students, on teachers, and on the local communities as well. We've had requests from districts and charters asking if these programs would be able to be sustained for an additional summer. And so providing this additional funding may allow for that for an additional year, since ESSER 3 funds do not expire until September of 2024. The slide you're looking at now outlines participation in summer programming during summer of 2022. Last summer, we had 25,197 students participating. The majority of those students were in middle grades, and we had about an equal split between males and females. You can go to the next slide. These graphs show the demographic breakdown for student participation in summer programming. About 45% of our student participants were Black, a little less than 30% were white, a little less than 15% were Hispanic, and then you can see the racial breakdown of the other categories, which were typically under about 10%. Additionally, 50% of our student participants were from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, and we also had about a fifth of the participating students who were identified as students with disabilities. Additionally, there were 10% of our student participants who were AIG students and about 5 who were multilingual learners. Additionally, at the request of Vice Chair Duncan, I also wanted to share some additional data with you that demonstrate the effectiveness of these programs. The information on this slide was actually shared in a larger qualitative report by Dr. Erin Manuel, who is also part of our team, with you all in April. However, I want to elevate this because this is specific to the Summer Career Accelerator programs. So in partnership with UNC EPIC, our research team collected and analyzed end-of-program surveys from administrators of these Career Accelerator programs. The research team was able to identify several trends in the narrative responses from these administrators. So some common trends that we saw were that these administrators reported gains in student self-esteem as well as employability, because these programs require that there is a career connection and that there is a community partnership established as well. Also, several administrators cited that these opportunities for students broaden students' perspectives and allow students to participate in activities that they may not be able to participate in during the traditional school year. And you can see the quote that I have on the slide echo a similar sentiment. So these Career Accelerator programs are a great way to ensure that we're increasing employability skills of our students, allowing opportunities for our students to explore different career pathways, giving students access to opportunities that they would not have without this program, and developing various portrait of a graduate competencies. You can go to the next slide. Additionally, we'd like to share some preliminary quantitative data related to student recovery by summer participation status. Our quantitative research analyst, Kaylin Clifton, has begun some initial work to track academic recovery for students who participate in these summer programs. Since we don't have released test scores for the most recent school year, this graph is looking at students who participated in summer programs during 2021. And who took end of grade tests in 2021 and 2022. The orange markers represent those students who participated in summer programming in 2021, and the blue markers represent students who did not participate in summer programming. So for the sake of time and to make this simple, if the orange marker is to the right of the blue marker, that means that those students who participated in summer programming made more recovery from year to year than those who did not participate. So if you look at the graph, especially towards the bottom where we see the ELA test scores, most of the orange markers are to the right of the blue markers. That means that these students who participated in summer programming made more recovery than those who did not participate in summer programming. However, this isn't necessarily true for math, but you will notice that there's lots of overlaps in the markers for math and, for those students that participated in summer programming and those who did not, which basically means that there's not a significant difference between the two groups. I do want you all to note that these data don't represent a true effect of summer programming. We'll need further analysis on this. However, it seems intuitive that summer program participation may have helped students to get back on track, especially when we're looking here in ELA. And I also realize that there is more room for analysis based on these data, and we are happy to provide those. We have an excellent research and evaluation team that can do some more analysis in the future if that is something that the board would like. But overall, I hope that it's evident that these programs are beneficial to both students, PSU staff, and their local communities, and therefore we would recommend that the board approve the ESSER 3 funds transfer request to PRC 188. And I am open to any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Questions? Chair Davis?
Appreciate the presentation, but how do we know this is the best use of this $2 million?
That's a great question. So this is based on feedback that we've received from the field, first of all, and that we have seen positive effects from the summer programming, as well as we have seen many PSUs spend down the funding for the summer career accelerator programs. For example, the PRC 188 funds, many districts are planning to use them fully this year because these are from ESSER 3 funds. However, they don't expire until September of 2024. So this gives them an extended period of time to expend those funds.
So is this the intervention that created the greatest recovery? Or are there other techniques that were used that had a greater effect on student recovery from the pandemic?
So that's a pretty challenging question, right? Like the best impact or the best intervention. One of the challenges that we're up against is creating new PRCs versus investing in PRCs that we know work. And so the kind of lift to create a PRC with only $2 million would mean we'd have a lot of districts that would not participate. Understanding we still have 60% of our ESSER 3 funds available to districts. So the burden of applying for a new program that's only going to give them, several $1,000s perhaps, is greater than us putting additional funding into a program that we know works. And so from the field, from what we've heard from the field and from the qualitative review that's been done by the OLR team, we think this is the best use of these particular funds.
Okay. It might be worth just a 30-second or less, or maybe I can say it and you can tell me how wrong I got it. These funds are ESSER funds that were not otherwise used in other categories, and so the question is how to go ahead and repurpose these funds into a known existing
Yes, sir. That is
ESSER 3
accurate.
category.
Yes.
Okay. So these are not. So the question is actually a good one in the sense: what is our belief of the best use of the funds given the categories that are available? And that's
yes.
And the other part is how it would be distributed to the LEAs. You should hit on that. As my understanding, it would be essentially an ADM type distribution.
Yeah, we would use the same formula that already exists, so everything is already in place for us to continue to distribute these additional funds to districts that are already participating without any burden on the district to reapply, other than I think do a budget adjustment. Yeah.
Other questions or comments?
I have a quick question.
Please.
What is the duration of the program, the summer instruction?
These particular programs?
Yes.
I think it's determined by the district with the funds that they have
So there's
available.
variability?
There
in
is
that?
some variability.
And my follow-up, if I may.
Please.
Tell me how you determine the movement, the difference between the blue and the orange on the data table? I mean, what were you, what were your factors?
Kaylin, do you want to answer that? That's why we have Kaylin in the audience.
Good.
We thought it was because he was enthralled by the meeting.
Hello, good afternoon. Ken Clifton, Research Analyst, OLR. What was the precise question exactly? I'm sorry.
So the PowerPoint frame that shows the little symbols, blue and orange or blue and red, so showing difference in gains or improvement, what were the factors in that?
So are you asking what are the...
So what caused one to the right, the orange to the right, what were you basing that on?
Okay, so let's see. Now that we have essentially 2 years of what we termed learning loss data in 2021, recovery data in 2022, we can essentially follow the same students over time and just take the difference in their scores between those 2 years. Mm-hmm. So essentially what you are looking at is the average change in those test scores according to whether students participated in summer 21 or not. So the orange markers would be the students that did participate. And like Rachel said, if the main idea here is that if the orange marker is to the right of the blue, then that indicates that in that kind of transition, so again, going back to the idea of tracking students over 2 years, that very bottom one, ELA grade 3, ELA grade 4, would indicate that group of students took the ELA grade 3 test in 21 and then went on to take ELA grade 4 in 22. So we take that difference, and all this is going to show us is the average change, whether an increase or decrease in their test score from those years. Does that answer the question?
It does. So you are not factoring in anything else like instruction during the year, effect of the classroom teacher.
I'm not explicitly throwing those things into any type of equation, but one thing to keep in mind is that because these are just average differences between 2 points in time, that difference is going to be associated with the sum of all things that happens between those 2 points in time. So, you know, this could at least partially, and we have reason to believe that it does at least partially reflect the effect of summer programming, but what you see in front of you, again, is going to capture everything that happened basically between the day the student took the test in 21 and the day they took the test in 2022.
Okay, that does answer my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Wright-Hunio. Thank you for the
Thank you.
presentation. That's the end of our action items on first reading. We're now in our action items. ISOP 5 is the report to the North Carolina General Assembly supplemental funds for teacher compensation, which I think Alexis Schaus has, and this report's already been referred to in the meeting today, and it is a difficult subject. It is a difficult report, and you may want to we don't need to revisit, we've had it twice, but we do need to revisit what you've done in light of the ongoing work to try to work with districts and the various inquiries that have been made on the legal front with respect to the statutory language and where we are.
Yes, thank you. So this report actually was due to the General Assembly in April, and it has been delayed as we get clarification and discuss with legal, both within the department and at the General Assembly. The report does provide, as I mentioned, there was currently it's a $170 million appropriation for supplements. This report is actually based on the 2022 year, which the appropriation was at $100 million. For interest, the House is proposing to increase that by another $70 million to make it a total appropriation of $240. You can see the data here. It does provide a minimum and maximum by school district. It does vary because the allotment itself is graduated based on the market rate of the real estate in that district. And as I stated, there were I believe 6 districts this year. Buncombe and Asheville City, you'll see, are not eligible noted, but they were revised so they do receive the funding now. So the last pages, we do have the districts that are listed as supplanting based on our interpretation of the language, and that is based on not whether the new money was supplanted, but whether there was a supplanting of the non-state funds, and that is a difference which some districts did not understand when they were making their year-end adjustments. Vice Chair Duncan, I'm not sure if there are additional items you'd like me to discuss on this, but I'm willing to take questions on it.
I would highlight for board members, if you look at the last 3 or 4 paragraphs of the report, those have been modified to reflect the fact there has been this difficulty in understanding. There's been a difference about interpretation. These are not small matters. This is significant money that's involved. I've got a copy of an email that went to a superintendent this morning while we've been meeting came from a superintendent that was directed to the department. There have been several. There's been a lot of discussion about this and a lot of concern. There is, as I understand it, provision in the budget bill that would allow a way to try to, I'm not going to say fix the issue, but help to remedy the issue. Is that correct?
That is correct. So to put a materiality on this, and it is different by each one of these school systems, it is the loss, the loss of the funding, if they were deemed to have supplanted and they could not remedy, in total is about $37 million. And so it is not a small amount. The total amount for this group here for if they were to remedy is $6 million. So that is not a small amount to just fix. It will be dependent on the language in the budget bill as to what is allowed for these school districts. There is, as I stated before, there is clarity on how the supplanting was to be calculated, and we have kind of done our calculation based on that. But as you know, we kind of await for the final language to determine kind of what the recourses are for these districts and how we as a department are instructed to proceed.
If we look at the list of the districts, these are not some of our wealthiest districts around the state. This would have a genuine impact on some districts that would be extremely impactful and negative for their ability to continue to attract quality teachers or educators with the benefit of having these supplemental funds. So I would ask us to consider, and I throw this open for comments, but I'd ask us to consider, while submitting this report, to also submit it with a strong endorsement or request that a way be found to alleviate the potential penalties that would go to these districts on this one occasion because of the clear misunderstanding and or interpretation issues that arose with respect to the statutory language. That would be a very hefty penalty to pay for that by many districts that are very ill-equipped to pay it. So I would ask the board to consider that we have that kind of endorsement that would go with the report. I'm seeing some nods of the head as I look around the room, but we can make that a motion, I suppose, as part of his Op 5 when we vote on it.
Could any objection to the board adopting the, how did you call it?
I think it called it an endorsement to try to find a way to hold these districts, to provide relief to these districts. Hold harmless, yeah.
Any objection to that? Okay, then let the record reflect that'll be included in our motion tomorrow.
Would not be held harmless in the following year because the interpretation would then be clear, but for this particular year, yes, that would be the intent. All right. Anything else on this? You have anything else?
No, I don't.
All right, well, I want to stop and say thank you to you. I also want to say thank you to Tim Hogemeyer. Both of you have spent a lot of time on this, dealt with a lot of school districts around the state, have done so with a caring attitude and with an understanding attitude of a very difficult situation. So I want to express appreciation to both you and others who have worked with you to what's going on with this. This has not necessarily been front and center for the board, but y'all have both spent a lot of time on this and with some sensitivity, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
We're now at action item Biz Op 6, which is a request for approval for an RFP for the North Carolina Stronger Connections Grant. This came before us at our last meeting. We've got Timothy Dryman, who's the Education Program Administrator in Federal Programs, to present on this issue, and Dr. Townsend may be here as well. I'd like to see her. So you'll recall there was some follow-up work that was being done on this, and so you may want to give a brief report on that, and then any questions we have.
Sure. Good afternoon again. As what was brought up last time in discussion item during the last board meeting, the North Carolina Stronger Connections Grant. Just as a review, in June of 2022, President Biden signed into law the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. This was in response to addressing rising gun violence and other types of violence in our schools and communities. From that act, $1 billion was appropriated to the Department of Education under the umbrella of Title IV-A. North Carolina received just under $30 million of those funds. The focus of those funds, based on the guidance given from the Department of Education, was to identify and support the schools and communities with the highest needs by focusing on 3 key areas addressed by the Department of Education: addressing social emotional needs for students as well as staff and families, building community and stakeholder partnerships, and designing policies and practices that advance equity, diversity, and protect student rights. Awarded PSUs will receive a grant not to exceed $675,000. Each awardee will receive a base amount of $250,000 and $1,500 per pupil based on the most current ADM they use to complete their most current eligible school summer report for Title I. These funds will be made available for use this fall and have an encumbrance date of September 30th, 2026. And I included the chart of all the schools that were eligible to receive, to be apply for these funds at your request. These include the county district school systems, the charters and labs, and the city school districts.
So the vote we'd be asked to make here is, it would be to approve this methodology, if you will, for proceeding with the RFP. Because of that, I'm going to just raise the question. We have 2 board members of 2 local districts that are on that, which I ask you to just consider as we go forward as to whether or not that may represent a conflict or not for this methodology. It may not, but it may in your mind, so I just raise it or highlight it, if you will. But that would be the question before us if we want to approve this methodology for proceeding forward. Any questions anybody has about this? All right, not seeing any. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
That'll bring us to 2 consent items. Biz Op 7. This is the, well, we're very fond of this annual report to the North Carolina General Assembly with the start dates and end dates for all schools in the state. It's a small, pretty easy report to compile, fairly easy, but it's often sparks some comments. The only additional authority we would have with respect to any start or end dates that may have a question as to whether they comply with the state statutes as they presently exist would be to send a letter reminding them of what the law states. And I think that pretty much ends the authority that we have with respect to the way the law sits right now. But that's the annual report. Any questions about that? And it's very thorough, it covers every school. So, Biz Op 8 is certification of finance officers, and this is good news. We have 5 new finance officers in districts, and several of them are districts that have had prolonged absences of CFOs, that is, have not had someone in the position. And in some places in some districts that are harder to get a CFO, so we're very excited about the fact that we've got 5 here for certification by the board that are being presented after vetting by the business office, and thankful for the work that went into that. The only thing remaining then are we have updates on contracts, the executed contracts report and the planned contracts reports. I've not heard any questions about that, but I pause in case there are any. Not seeing any. We have finally the requested updates with respect to our monthly budget report. This budget report almost brings us to the end of the fiscal year. I have not heard any questions about that either, but I pause. Not seeing any hands, we are finished with our report. I appreciate everyone's attention.
Thank you, Vice Chair Duncan. That concludes our open discussion for today. Appreciate everyone's participation and the preparation that went in today's work. I now seek a motion to go into closed session. Vice Chair Duncan.
Thank you. I move that we go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute, Section 143-318.11, A, 1, 3, and 6. And in order to prevent the disclosure of information that is privileged or confidential pursuant to North Carolina General Statute Sections 115C-319 and -321, and NCGS Sections 132-6.1C et sec. To consider the qualifications, competence, performance, or condition of employment of public officers or employees or prospective public officers or employees, and to consult with our attorneys in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorneys and the public body, including a discussion of the following pending cases: Northeast Raleigh Charter Academy doing business as Torchlight Academy versus Torchlight Academy Schools et al. Versus North Carolina State Board of Education and Stephen Bowens. Denise and Escabana Henderson and Kinetic Minds versus NCDPI, I believe, excuse me. Hall versus Lyles et al. And Brown versus NCDPI.
Motion by Vice Chair Duncan. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Hall. Dr. Petrie Martin.
Dr. Oxendine.
Yes.
Mrs. Kamnitz.
Yes.
Mr. Keenan.
Yes.
Mr. Hull.
Yes.
Dr. Tipton Rogers. Mrs. White.
Yes.
Mr. Blackburn.
Yes.
Dr. Ford.
Yes.
Treasurer Falwell. Lieutenant Governor Robinson. Vice Chair Duncan.
Yes.
Chair Davis.
Yes, motion carries. Let's be in closed session at 5 p.m. It's about 5 minutes. And we'll reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. for open session.